taking the breach with it, sealing both worlds. The collected, I said. They're trapped. No, they're freed. The boys release cascades, every witness released, returning home. But different. Yes. Changed, but alive. And us? We're the paradox we exist between. Neither collected nor free. Forever? Until someone opens another breach. Then we become the new guardians. The new entities. That's horrible. That's balance. I thought about it. An eternity guarding the walls between worlds. With Ada. Could be worse, I said. She smiled. Could be. In the distance, I could see others. The volunteers who came with us. The previous guardians. All waiting. What now? I asked. Now we watch. We wait. We prevent. For how long? Until the last witness forgets. Until the last truth is buried. Until reality stops needing cracks. So, forever. Maybe. Or maybe just until tomorrow. She took my hand. We walked toward the others. Behind us, the worlds sealed. The breach closed. The collection ended. But ahead, infinity waited. And somewhere, in a rebuilt reality, Ezekiel Boone's truck was found. Medical supplies delivered. Lives saved. A small redemption in an ocean of loss. But sometimes small redemptions are enough. Sometimes they're everything. Hello, friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The digital clock on my dashboard glowed 2:47 a.m. as I rolled past mile marker 142 on I-80, somewhere in the dark heart of Ohio. My name's Dale Morrison, and I've been hauling freight across these Midwest highways for 12 years now. 12 years of endless asphalt, truck stop coffee, and lonely nights watching the white lines blur together under my headlights. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I found at that rest area. It started 3 weeks ago. I was running a regular route from Cleveland to Des Moines, hauling automotive parts in my Peterbilt. The kind of run I could do with my eyes closed, if that wasn't a spectacularly bad idea for a trucker. I'd been driving for about 6 hours straight, and my bladder was screaming at me something fierce. The next truck stop was still 40 miles out, but I remembered there was a rest area coming up in about 5 miles. One of those old ones Ohio built back in the 70s. Just a parking lot, some picnic tables, and a concrete block building with restrooms. When I pulled off the highway and into the rest area, my headlights swept across the parking lot, and something immediately felt off. There were 5 vehicles parked there, a silver Honda Accord, a blue Ford F-150, a white Chevy Suburban, a red Toyota Camry, and an old green Plymouth sedan that looked like it hadn't moved since Reagan was president. They were all parked at odd angles, not in the marked spaces, but scattered randomly across the lot like toys dropped by a careless kid. I pulled my rig to the far end of the lot, keeping my engine running. Through my windshield, I could see the vehicles clearly in the yellow glow of the overhead lights. Every single one had its driver's door hanging open, not just unlocked, wide open, like the occupants had jumped out in a hurry and never bothered to close them. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. In 12 years of driving, I'd stopped at hundreds of rest areas, and I'd never seen anything like this. My first thought was maybe there'd been some kind of emergency, a medical situation where everyone had rushed to help someone. But the parking lot was dead silent. No people, no movement, nothing. I sat there for a full minute, just watching and listening. The only sound was the low rumble of my engine and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. My bladder was still complaining, but suddenly taking a leak didn't seem quite so urgent. Something was very wrong here, and every instinct I had was telling me to drop the transmission into gear and get the hell out. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, one of those heavy mag lights that doubles as a club if necessary, and climbed down from my cab. The autumn air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of dead leaves and something else I couldn't quite place. Something metallic and wrong. I walked toward the nearest car, the Honda Accord. My boots crunched on the gravel, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. As I got closer, I could see the interior dome light was on, casting a weak glow over empty seats. The keys were still in the ignition, and the dashboard lights were on, though the engine was off. A purse sat on the passenger seat, its contents spilled across the upholstery, wallet, lipstick, cell phone. The phone's screen was cracked, like it had been dropped. I moved to the Ford pickup. Same story, door open, keys in the ignition, nobody home. There was a half-eaten sandwich on the dashboard and a thermos of coffee in the cup holder. I touched the thermos with the back of my hand. Still warm. My mouth went dry. Whatever had happened here, it had happened recently. Maybe in the last hour, possibly less. The smart thing would have been to get back in my truck and call 911. Let the cops sort this out. But I kept walking, drawn by some morbid fascination I couldn't explain. The Suburban was next. This one was different. The back seats were full of luggage and kids' toys. A portable DVD player was still running, playing some animated movie on a loop. The screen cast flickering blue light through the windows. On the driver's seat was a road atlas, open to Ohio, with a route highlighted in yellow marker. That's when I noticed the first strange detail that would haunt me for weeks. On the inside of the open driver's door, there were scratches in the plastic, deep gouges, like someone had clawed at it desperately. And at the edge of the door frame, caught on a sharp bit of metal, was a small piece of fabric. Plaid flannel, the kind you'd see on 1,000 different shirts at any truck stop in the Midwest. I was reaching for the fabric when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It was coming from the restroom building, maybe 50 yards away. A rhythmic thumping, like someone banging on a door. Thump, thump, thump. Steady and deliberate. I stood frozen, flashlight beam wavering in my suddenly unsteady hand. The thumping continued, neither speeding up nor slowing down, just that steady, methodical beat. Thump, thump, thump. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was screaming at me to leave. Get in the truck, drive away, forget this place existed. But there was a possibility, however slim, that someone needed help. Maybe someone was trapped in there. Maybe that's where all the people from these cars had gone. I started walking toward the restroom building, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The building was a low, rectangular structure made of brown brick with 2 entrance doors, one for men, one for women. The thumping was coming from inside, but I couldn't tell which side. As I got closer, I noticed something else that made my skin crawl. The ground around the building was covered in footprints, hundreds of them, all going in different directions. But here's the thing that really got me. They all seemed to start at the building and go outward, like a bunch of people had come out of the restrooms and scattered in every direction. But there were no tracks going in. The thumping stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the noise. I stood there, flashlight trained on the men's room door, trying to convince myself to either go in or walk away. That's when I heard the voice. "Hello? Is someone out there?" It was muffled, coming from inside the men's room. A woman's voice, which didn't make sense. Young, scared, desperate. "Please, I need help. Please." I took a step closer. "Ma'am? Are you hurt? What are you doing in the men's room?" "The door... Something's wrong with the door. I can't get out. Please." Something about this felt wrong. Why would a woman be in the men's room? How did she get locked in if the door opened outward, as most restroom doors did, but the fear in her voice sounded genuine. "Hang on," I called out. "I'm coming." I reached for the door handle, a cold metal bar that felt like ice under my palm. As I started to pull, the voice inside changed. It got deeper, rougher. "Yes, come in. Come in and help." I jerked my hand back like I'd been burned. That wasn't the same voice. It wasn't even close. It sounded like someone doing a bad impression of the woman's voice, like they'd forgotten what they were supposed to sound like halfway through the sentence. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering in my chest. The thumping started again, but now it was coming from both restroom doors. Thump, 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 in perfect synchronization. That's when I saw something that made me run. Really run, not just back away, but full-on sprint to my truck. In the narrow gap under the men's room door, illuminated by my swinging flashlight beam, I saw fingers. Dozens of them pressing out from under the door, feeling around like blind worms. But they were all wrong, too long, too many joints, bending in ways fingers shouldn't bend. I ran harder than I'd run in years, my boots slipping on the gravel. Behind me, I heard the restroom doors bang open and something that sounded like multiple people running, but with a weird off-rhythm gait, like they were all trying to run in sync but couldn't quite manage it. I practically flew up into my cab, slamming the door behind me and throwing the locks. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to get the truck in gear. As I started to pull out, my headlights swept across the restroom building one more time. There were people standing there, maybe a dozen of them, all perfectly still, all facing my truck. Men, women, even a couple of kids. They looked normal enough from a distance, but something about the way they stood was wrong. Too still, too synchronized. Like mannequins that had been posed by someone who didn't quite understand how humans were supposed to stand. I gunned it out of there, my trailer fishtailing as I merged back onto I-80. In my mirrors, I could see them still standing there, watching, until the darkness swallowed them up. I drove for another hour before I stopped at a well-lit truck stop full of people. Normal people who moved like people should move. I called the Ohio State Highway Patrol and reported what I'd seen, leaving out the weird parts and just telling them about the abandoned vehicles. They said they'd send someone to check it out. The next morning, I saw a small item in the news. 5 vehicles found abandoned at a rest area on I-80. No signs of the owners. Police investigating. No mention of anything else. I thought that would be the end of it. I changed my route, started taking I-70 instead of I-80. Told myself it was just a weird night. Maybe some kind of elaborate prank or something I didn't understand. But a week later, I was talking to my buddy Earl at a truck stop in Indiana, and he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Strangest thing," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I stopped at that rest area near mile marker 142 last night. You know, the old one? There were 5 cars in the lot, all with their doors open. Gave me the creeps, so I didn't even stop. Just pulled right through." "What kind of cars?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Let's see. A silver Honda, a blue pickup, white Suburban, red Camry, and some old green beater. Plymouth, I think." The same cars. Exactly the same cars. "What time was this?" I asked. "Oh, about 2:30 in the morning. Why?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because if Earl had seen those same cars a week after I had, then something was happening at that rest area that defied explanation. Either those cars had been returned somehow, or what I'd seen hadn't been abandoned cars at all, but something else. Something that looked like abandoned cars. Something that wanted people to stop and investigate. I started asking around, casual-like, whenever I met other truckers. Had anyone else stopped at that rest area? Seen anything weird? The stories I heard made me wish I hadn't asked. Randy from Columbus said he'd stopped there 2 weeks ago. Same cars, same open doors. But he'd heard children laughing from inside the restroom building. The laugh of kids playing, except it was 3 a.m. and there were no kids anywhere. Vince, who runs refrigerated goods to Chicago, said he'd pulled in there just to turn around, didn't even stop. But as he was backing up, he swore he saw faces in all the car windows, pressed against the glass, watching him. When he looked again, they were gone. Lloyd told me the worst story. He'd actually gotten out and walked to the restroom. Said the door was propped open, and inside, the lights were flickering. In the flashing light, he saw people standing in the stalls, facing the walls, completely motionless. He counted 6 people in a restroom that only had 3 stalls. He backed out real quiet and drove 8 hours straight without stopping. But here's the thing that really messed with my head. I looked up the news reports, going back years. Every few months, there'd be a small article about abandoned vehicles found at rest areas along I-80. Different rest areas, but always the same pattern. Cars with doors open, no sign of the occupants, personal belongings left behind. The articles would mention search efforts, investigations, but never any follow-ups, never any resolution, like the people just vanished into thin air. I started keeping a log, tracking the incidents. There was a pattern, though it took me a while to see it. The incidents moved east to west along I-80, hitting each rest area in sequence over the course of about 6 months, then starting over. Like something was traveling the highway, stopping at each rest area in turn, then circling back to start again. By my calculations, whatever it was would be back at mile marker 142 in about 3 days. I told myself I wouldn't go back. Told myself it was none of my business, that I should just keep my head down and haul my freight. But the truth is, once you see something like that, you can't just forget it. It eats at you. You lie awake at night wondering what those things in the restroom were, where those people went, why the cars are always the same. So 3 nights later, I found myself taking the exit for that rest area again. It was 2:35 a.m., almost the exact same time as my first visit. I pulled into the lot with my lights off, stopping at the entrance. The cars were there. The same 5 cars in the same positions with the same open doors, but this time I wasn't alone. There was another truck in the lot, a Freightliner with Arkansas plates, and standing next to it, looking at the cars with a flashlight, was another trucker. I recognized him. It was Curtis Webb, a driver I'd met a few times over the years. Good guy, reliable, not the type to spook easy. I flashed my lights once to let him know I was there, then pulled up beside his truck. Curtis walked over as I climbed down from my cab. His face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. "Dale? That you?" he asked. "Yeah, it's me. Curtis, what are you doing here?" "Same thing you are, I suspect. Heard the stories, had to see for myself." He gestured at the cars. "Been here about 10 minutes. Haven't had the balls to get any closer." "Smart man," I said. "I've been here before. Trust me, you don't want to go near that restroom." "The restroom?" Curtis looked where I was pointing. "What's in there?" Before I could answer, we both heard it. The thumping, that same rhythmic banging I'd heard before. Thump, thump, thump. Curtis took a step back. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But last time I was here, something came out of there. Something that looked like people but wasn't." We stood there, 2 grown men scared of a rest area restroom, watching and listening. The thumping continued for maybe a minute, then stopped. The silence that followed was oppressive, like the whole world was holding its breath. Then the lights went out. All of them. The overhead lights in the parking lot, the lights in the restroom building, even the dome lights in the abandoned cars. The only illumination came from our truck's running lights and the distant glow of the highway. "We should go," Curtis whispered. I was about to agree when we heard the voice. Not from the restroom this time, but from one of the cars. The Honda. A man's voice, calm and conversational. "Hey there, fellas. Could you give me a hand? My battery's dead." We both turned our flashlights toward the Honda. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat, a middle-aged man in a Cleveland Indians cap and a windbreaker. He was smiling, but even from 30 feet away, I could tell something was wrong with that smile. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. "Come on," the man said, his voice never changing tone. "Just need a jump. Won't take but a minute." Curtis grabbed my arm. "Dale, that car was empty 2 minutes ago. I checked them all." The man in the Honda turned his head to look directly at us. The movement was wrong, too smooth, too mechanical, like his head was on a swivel. "Don't be rude, fellas. I asked nice." That's when I noticed the others. There were people in all the cars now. A woman in the Suburban, adjusting the rear-view mirror. A teenager in the Camry, bobbing his head like he was listening to music. An elderly couple in the Plymouth, seeming to have a conversation. A man in the Ford, drinking from that thermos I'd checked a week ago. But they were all wrong. Their movements were just slightly off, like they were puppets being controlled by someone who had only ever seen humans from a distance. And when I looked closer, I realized they were all doing the exact same things, just with slight variations. The woman in the Suburban adjusted her mirror, reset it, adjusted it again, in a perfect loop. The teenager's head bobbing never varied in rhythm. The elderly couple's mouths moved in the same pattern over and over. "Curtis," I said quietly, "we need to leave. Right now." But Curtis was already backing toward his truck. "Way ahead of you." The man in the Honda opened his door and stepped out. Under the weak light from our trucks, I could see him more clearly, and I wished I couldn't. His clothes looked normal enough, but his skin had a weird, waxy sheen to it, like a mannequin that had been painted to look alive. And his eyes didn't reflect light the way eyes should. "Rude," he said, still in that same conversational tone. "Very rude." All the car doors opened at once. The sound, 5 doors swinging open in perfect unison, made my skin crawl. The people inside started getting out, moving with that same slightly wrong gait I remembered from my first visit. Curtis and I ran for our trucks. As I climbed into my cab, I saw something that nearly made me fall right back out. In my passenger seat was a woman. Young, pretty, wearing a waitress uniform from some diner. She was smiling that same too wide smile. "Hi there," she said brightly. "Going my way?" I yanked open my door and literally fell out of the truck, landing hard on the gravel. The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and started to climb across to the driver's seat. I scrambled to my feet and ran to Curtis's truck, yanking on the passenger door. Locked. "Curtis, open up!" Curtis was fighting with something in his cab. Through the window, I could see another figure in there with him, arms wrapped around him from behind. Curtis was trying to push it off, but it held on with inhuman strength. Behind me, I heard doors slamming and footsteps on gravel. Those things from the cars were coming. I grabbed the biggest rock I could find and smashed Curtis's passenger window, reaching in to unlock the door. As I climbed in, Curtis finally managed to throw the thing off him. It hit the driver's door and slumped down, and I got my first good look at it. It was wearing Curtis's clothes. It had Curtis's face. But it was like a rough copy, the details not quite right. The eyes were the wrong shade, the nose slightly off-center, the hair parted on the wrong side. The real Curtis started his engine, throwing the truck in gear. "What the hell? What the hell? What the hell?" "Drive!" I shouted. He didn't need to be told twice. We roared out of that rest area, tires squealing. In the side mirror, I saw them standing in the parking lot. The things from the cars, the woman from my truck, the fake Curtis. They stood in a perfect line, watching us go. We didn't stop until we reached a truck stop 50 miles away. Curtis was shaking so bad he could barely hold his coffee cup. We sat in a booth in the back where we could see everyone who came in. "What were those things?" Curtis asked for the 5th time. "I don't know. I really don't. That thing in my truck, it looked like me, Dale. How is that possible?" I didn't have an answer. We sat there until the sun came up, neither of us wanting to get back on the road. Finally, Curtis said he was done. He was going to drive his truck back to the company, turn in his keys, and find another line of work. Last I heard, he was working construction in Little Rock. Me? I kept driving. But I changed my routes, stayed away from I-80 for months, tried to forget what I'd seen, tried to convince myself it was some kind of hallucination or maybe an elaborate hoax. But then, about 2 months later, I got a call from Earl. He was in the hospital in Toledo, pretty banged up, but alive. He'd been driving on I-80 and decided to stop at that rest area around 2:45 a.m. despite everything I'd told him. Said he just had to see for himself. The cars were there, of course. But this time, Earl said, one of them was his car. A 2015 Dodge Ram, same color, same license plate, right down to the air freshener hanging from the mirror. And sitting in the driver's seat was Earl himself. Or something that looked exactly like Earl. He said he stood there, frozen, staring at himself through the windshield. The other Earl smiled and waved, then got out of the truck and started walking toward him. That's when Earl ran. He got in his truck and tore out of there, but he was so shaken that he drifted off the road about 10 miles later and hit a guardrail. The police found him unconscious in his cab. When he came to in the hospital, he told them about the rest area. But of course, they didn't believe him. Thought he'd fallen asleep at the wheel and had some kind of weird dream. But I believed him. Because by then, I'd done more research. I'd found reports going back decades, always dismissed as urban legends or trucker tales. Stories about rest areas where people disappeared, where cars were found abandoned, where travelers reported seeing impossible things. And always, the same pattern. The same 5 cars appearing at different rest areas. The same voices calling for help. The same things that looked human, but weren't quite right. I started to develop a theory. What if those things weren't trying to replace us? What if they were trying to become us? Learning by observation, getting better at mimicking human behavior each time someone stopped to investigate? That would explain why the copies were getting more convincing. Why Earl's double looked exactly like him while the fake Curtis I'd seen was still obviously wrong. They were practicing, improving, evolving. But evolving into what? And why? I didn't get my answer until last week. Last week changed everything. I'd been avoiding I-80 for months, taking longer routes that cost me time and money, but at least kept me away from that cursed rest area. Then dispatch gave me a rush job, automotive parts that absolutely had to be in Chicago by morning. The only way to make the deadline was I-80, straight through Ohio in the dead of night. I told myself I'd just drive past the rest area. Wouldn't even look. Keep my eyes on the road, and my foot on the gas. But as I approached mile marker 142, doing 70 in the right lane, I saw something that made me ease off the accelerator. There were lights at the rest area. Not just the normal overhead lights, but dozens of them. Flashlights, spotlights, the red and blue strobes of emergency vehicles. The place was lit up like a football stadium. Against my better judgment, I pulled over on the shoulder about a quarter mile past the exit. I grabbed my binoculars from the glove box. Yeah, I keep binoculars in the truck now, don't judge. And focused on the rest area. There were at least a dozen vehicles there, but not the usual 5 abandoned cars. These were police cruisers, unmarked government sedans, and what looked like a mobile command center. People in hazmat suits were walking around the parking lot, and they'd set up some kind of perimeter with yellow tape. I sat there watching for maybe 5 minutes, trying to figure out what was happening. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, but it was an Ohio area code. "Mr. Morrison?" The voice was female, professional, with that particular tone that suggested government authority. "Yeah?" "Mr. Morrison, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. I understand you're parked on the shoulder of I-80 near mile marker 142. My blood went cold. How did they know where I was? How did they have my number? "I need you to continue to your destination, Mr. Morrison. Do not stop at the rest area. Do not take any photographs. Do not discuss what you've seen with anyone." "How did you—" "We've been monitoring this situation for some time. We're aware of your previous encounters at this location. Your reports to the Ohio State Highway Patrol were very helpful." "My reports? They told me they couldn't find anything unusual." "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be frank with you. This is an ongoing federal investigation into a series of incidents along the I-80 corridor. We know you've seen things. We know others have too. But for your safety and the integrity of our investigation, I need you to drive away right now." "What about all those missing people? The abandoned cars?" There was a pause. "Mr. Morrison, there's a truck stop about 30 miles west of your current location. The Flying J off exit 118. If you stop there, someone will meet you. They'll answer what questions they can. But you need to leave now." The line went dead. I sat there for another minute, watching the lights at the rest area through my binoculars. As I watched, I saw them loading something into the back of a large unmarked van. It was covered in a black tarp, but it was roughly the size and shape of a car. One of the 5 cars. I started my engine and got back on the highway. 30 miles felt like 300, my mind racing with questions. What had the FBI found? How long had they been investigating? And most importantly, what were those things at the rest area? The Flying J was mostly empty when I pulled in, just a few trucks scattered around the lot. I parked near the back and waited. About 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up beside me. A woman got out, Asian, mid-30s, wearing a conservative black suit. She knocked on my door. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Agent Chen." I climbed down from my cab. Up close, she looked tired, like she'd been working too many hours with too little sleep. "Coffee?" she asked. "This might take a while." We went inside and found a quiet booth in the back corner of the restaurant area. She ordered black coffee. I got the same, though my stomach was churning too much to drink it. "First," she said, pulling out a tablet, "I need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. What I'm about to tell you is classified, and discussing it with anyone could result in federal charges." I read through the document. It was full of legal jargon, but the gist was clear. Keep your mouth shut or go to prison. I signed it. Agent Chen pulled up something on her tablet and turned it toward me. It was a map of the United States with red dots scattered across it. There were dozens of them, clustered along major highways. "Every dot represents an incident similar to what you've experienced," she said. "Abandoned vehicles, missing persons, witnesses reporting unusual encounters at rest areas. The pattern goes back at least 40 years, possibly longer." 40 years? And you're just now investigating? "We've been investigating for the past 5 years, Mr. Morrison. Before that, the incidents were dismissed as unrelated missing persons cases. It wasn't until someone noticed the pattern, the same vehicles appearing at different locations, the synchronized timing, the witness reports, that we realized we were dealing with something unusual." Unusual. That's one way to put it. I took a sip of coffee, trying to steady my nerves. "What are they? Those things that look like people but aren't?" Chen was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh how much to tell me. "We don't know exactly what they are, but we know what they do. They observe, they mimic, and they replace. Replace? She pulled up another file on her tablet. Photos of missing persons. Dozens of them. Every person who's disappeared at one of these rest areas has later been spotted elsewhere. Different cities, different states, but always the same pattern. They show up, interact briefly with people who knew them, then disappear again. But the people who encounter them always say the same thing. Something was off. They looked right, sounded right, but their behavior was wrong. Like copies, I said. Bad copies that get better over time. Exactly. We believe they're learning. Each encounter teaches them more about human behavior, human interaction. They're getting better at blending in. But why? What's the point? That's what we're trying to figure out. Chen pulled up another image, a grainy security camera photo from what looked like a gas station. This was taken 2 weeks ago in Pennsylvania. Recognize anyone? I leaned in closer and felt my stomach drop. It was Curtis, or something that looked exactly like Curtis, down to the Razorback's cap he always wore. He was standing at a gas pump, but his posture was wrong, too straight, too rigid, like someone standing at attention. That's not Curtis, I said. Curtis quit trucking months ago. He's in Little Rock. We know. We've confirmed the real Curtis Webb is alive and well in Arkansas. This thing was driving a truck with his old company's logo using his CDL number, following his old routes. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Chen swiped to another photo. This one showed the inside of a truck stop restaurant. There were maybe a dozen people sitting at tables, all truckers by the look of them. This was taken yesterday in Indiana. Every person in this photo has been reported missing from various rest areas over the past year. I studied the faces. They all looked normal at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more wrong they seemed. They were all sitting the exact same way, holding their coffee cups at the same angle, their heads tilted at identical degrees. They're gathering, Chen said. For the first time, we're seeing them congregate in groups. We think something's changing in their behavior pattern. Changing how? They're becoming bolder, less concerned with staying hidden. 3 days ago, one of them walked into a DMV in Nebraska and tried to renew a license for someone who'd been missing for 6 months. When the clerk questioned the discrepancies, it just walked out. Didn't run, didn't panic, just turned and left like it had completed its task. So what are you doing about it? That scene at the rest area. We're trying to capture one, Chen admitted. Every time we've gotten close before, they've simply vanished. Left the vehicles, left the area, just gone. But tonight, we have the entire rest area surrounded. Thermal imaging, motion sensors, the works. If one of those things shows up, we'll get it. My phone buzzed. A text from Earl. You seeing this? With a link to a news article. The headline read, "Multiple truck stops report strange encounters with familiar strangers." Chen saw me reading. That's going to be pulled from the web within the hour. We're trying to keep this contained, but it's getting harder. More people are noticing the pattern. What do you want from me? I asked. Information. You've had more encounters than almost anyone else who's still... She paused. Still alive? Still accounted for, she corrected, though I wasn't sure that was better. We need to know everything you remember, every detail, no matter how small. So I told her everything. The fingers under the door, the woman in my truck, the fake Curtis. She recorded it all, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. The fingers, she finally said. You're sure they had too many joints? Positive, like they had an extra knuckle or two. She made a note on her tablet. That's consistent with other reports. We think they might not be fully physical. Not in the way we understand it, anyway. What does that mean? Have you ever heard of dimensional fold theory? I shook my head. The simplified version is that our reality might exist alongside other realities, separated by barriers we can't normally perceive. Sometimes these barriers weaken at certain locations, places where traumatic events occurred or where specific geological conditions exist, or sometimes for reasons we don't understand. You're saying these things are from another dimension? We're saying it's one possibility. The abandoned vehicles could be anchor points, objects from our reality that they use to maintain a connection. The mimicry could be their way of trying to exist in our world, copying our forms because they don't have stable ones of their own. That's insane. 6 months ago, I would have agreed with you. Chen rubbed her eyes. But we've exhausted every conventional explanation. These things don't show up on thermal imaging. They don't leave DNA evidence. They can appear and disappear without any trace. Either we're dealing with something beyond our current understanding of physics, or what? Or they're very good at making us think that's what they are. My phone rang. It was dispatch, probably wondering why I'd stopped. I let it go to voicemail. There's something else, Chen said. We've detected a pattern in their movements. They're not random. The rest areas they appear at, the sequence they follow, it's deliberate. They're moving toward something. Toward what? Chicago. Every route they follow eventually leads to Chicago. We don't know why, but we think something's going to happen there. Soon. I thought about my load, the automotive parts that absolutely had to be in Chicago by morning. The rush job that forced me to take I-80. Was that really a coincidence? I need to go, I said. I have a delivery. Mr. Morrison. Dale. I need you to understand something. You're not safe. None of the witnesses are. We've been monitoring all of you, trying to provide protection without being obvious about it. But 3 witnesses have disappeared in the past month. People who saw what you saw, who knew what you know. Are you saying those things are hunting us? I'm saying be careful. Stay in populated areas. Don't stop at isolated rest areas. And if you see anything unusual, call this number immediately. She handed me a business card with just a phone number on it, no name or agency identification. I stood to leave, then thought of something. Agent Chen, those 5 cars at the rest area, who did they belong to originally? The real ones, I mean. She hesitated. The Honda belonged to a teacher from Akron who disappeared in 1981. The Ford was reported stolen from a dealership in 1987, but the owner was never found. The Suburban belonged to a family of 4 who vanished during a road trip in 1993. The Camry was abandoned after its owner went missing in 2001. And the Plymouth? What about the Plymouth? The Plymouth was manufactured in 1974, but according to our records, that specific VIN number was never assigned to any vehicle. It shouldn't exist. That sent a chill down my spine. It's theirs. An original, not a copy. That's our working theory. It might be how they first entered our reality, creating something that looked like it belonged but never quite did. I left the truck stop with more questions than answers. The drive to Chicago was tense, checking my mirrors constantly, jumping at every shadow. I made my delivery just before dawn, then found a motel in the suburbs. I needed sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Those things were heading to Chicago, all of them converging on the city for some unknown purpose, and I was right in the middle of it. I tried calling Curtis to warn him, but his number was disconnected. Called Earl, but it went straight to voicemail. One by one, I tried every trucker I knew who'd had an encounter at that rest area. None of them answered. That's when I realized the truth. Agent Chen said 3 witnesses had disappeared, but I was starting to think it was more than that. Maybe all of them were gone, replaced by those things. Maybe I was the only one left who knew the truth. I looked out my motel window at the Chicago skyline in the distance. Somewhere out there, those things were gathering, planning something. And I was probably the only person besides the FBI who knew it was happening. I made a decision. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to find out what those things wanted, why they were here, and most importantly, how to stop them. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. News articles about missing truckers, unexplained disappearances at rest areas, sightings of people acting strangely. The pattern was there if you knew what to look for. Dozens of incidents, all pointing toward Chicago. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A trucking forum post from 2 days ago. Anyone else seeing drivers that look familiar but wrong? Spotted 5 of them convoying toward Chicago on I-90. Same speed, same lane changes, like they were synchronized. The responses were what scared me. Saw the same thing on I-94. Counted at least 10 trucks moving in perfect formation. I-55 here. Passed a whole line of them. Tried to radio, but no response. They're all heading to the same place, marshalling yard on the south side. I mapped the location. It was an old freight depot that had been closed for years. The perfect place for something to happen without attracting attention. I should have called Agent Chen. Should have reported what I'd found and let the FBI handle it. But I had to know. After everything I'd seen, everything I'd been through, I had to know what those things were planning. I got back in my truck and headed for the marshalling yard. It was full dark by the time I arrived, and the place looked deserted from the street. But I could see lights in the distance, behind the old warehouse buildings. I parked a few blocks away and approached on foot. The yard was full of trucks, dozens of them, all 18-wheelers, all parked in perfect rows. Their engines were running, filling the air with diesel fumes. But there were no drivers visible, no movement at all. I crept closer, staying in the shadows between buildings. That's when I saw them. The drivers were all standing in a circle in the middle of the yard, maybe 50 of them. They were completely still, facing inward, like they were waiting for something. I recognized some of the faces. Curtis was there, or the thing pretending to be Curtis. Earl, too, and Lloyd, and at least a dozen other drivers I'd met over the years. All of them replaced, all of them wrong. Then, something happened that I'll never forget. They all turned their heads at exactly the same moment, looking up at the sky. Their mouths opened in unison, and a sound came out. Not words, but a low, thrumming hum that made my teeth ache. The air in the center of their circle began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. The shimmer grew larger, more defined, until it looked like a vertical pool of mercury hanging in the air. Through it, I could see something. Another place, with structures that hurt to look at, all wrong angles and impossible geometry. One of the fake drivers stepped forward, the one wearing Curtis's face. It spoke, but not in Curtis's voice. The sound was layered, like multiple people talking at once. The pathway is stable. Begin the transfer. The others started moving toward the shimmering portal, walking in perfect synchronization. But they weren't just walking through. As each one entered, they seemed to unfold, revealing their true forms. Things that were definitely not human, all writhing tendrils and too many eyes, shapes that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. I must have gasped or made some sound, because suddenly every head turned toward my hiding spot. 50 pairs of eyes that looked human but weren't, all staring directly at me. The fake Curtis smiled. "Mr. Morrison, we've been waiting for you." I ran. Behind me, I heard footsteps, dozens of them, all perfectly synchronized, gaining on me. I made it to my truck, fumbled with the keys, got the engine started just as they reached the street. In my mirrors, I saw them standing there, watching me drive away. They didn't pursue. They just watched. I drove straight to the nearest police station, burst in babbling about invasions and portals and things that weren't human. They thought I was crazy or on drugs. By the time I convinced them to send someone to check, the marshalling yard was empty. No trucks, no portal, no evidence that anything had happened. Agent Chen called me an hour later. "You were supposed to stay away." "Did you know? About the portal?" About what they really are? We suspected. Mr. Morrison, you need to come in. We need to debrief you properly. They knew my name, I said. The fake Curtis knew who I was. They were waiting for me. I know. That's why you need to come in. You're not safe. I hung up, because I'd finally figured it out. The reason they kept appearing at the same rest area, with the same cars. The reason they were learning to mimic us so perfectly. The reason they were gathering in Chicago. They weren't invading. They were evacuating. Something in their dimension was forcing them to flee, and they were trying to establish a foothold in ours. The mimicry wasn't about replacing us. It was about learning to survive here, to blend in. The portal in Chicago was probably one of many, bringing more of them through. But here's what really terrified me. If something was bad enough to make interdimensional beings flee their reality, what would happen when it followed them to ours? I've been driving for 3 days straight now, stopping only for gas and coffee. I can't go home. They know where I live. Can't trust other truckers. I don't know who's real anymore. The FBI keeps calling, but I don't answer. How do I know Agent Chen is who she claims to be? How do I know she's even human? The news is starting to report strange incidents across the Midwest. Unexplained disappearances, sightings of unusual phenomena, emergency services responding to calls that turn out to be false alarms at empty locations. The government is calling it mass hysteria, but I know better. They're spreading out from Chicago, establishing themselves, preparing for something. And the real horror is that we don't know what they're preparing for. Are they trying to save themselves? Or are they the advance guard for something worse? I'm writing this all down because someone needs to know the truth. If something happens to me, if I disappear, or if you see me but I'm not quite right, you'll know why. Check the rest areas. Watch for the signs. And whatever you do, if you see 5 abandoned cars with their doors open at 2:47 a.m., just keep driving. Don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Because sometimes the scariest thing on the highway isn't what's chasing you, it's what's running away from something even worse. It's been 2 weeks since the marshalling yard incident, and I'm still on the road. Can't stop. Won't stop. The moment I stay in one place too long, I start seeing them. In the corner of my eye at truck stops, in the vehicles passing me on the highway, even in the reflection of my own mirrors. They're everywhere now, and they're not trying to hide anymore. I've been keeping track of the news on my phone. The media is calling it the Midwest Mystery. A wave of strange sightings and unexplained events spreading out from Chicago like ripples in a pond. Missing persons reports have tripled. Whole families vanishing from their homes, only to be spotted days later hundreds of miles away, acting unusual according to witnesses. The FBI has stopped calling me. Either they've given up or they've got bigger problems to deal with. Probably both. Last night I was refueling at a station outside Fort Wayne when I noticed the attendant. Young kid, maybe 20, working the night shift. Nothing unusual about that, except for the way he was moving. Every gesture perfectly measured, every movement deliberate. When he handed me my receipt, our eyes met, and I saw recognition there. Not of me as a person, but of me as someone who knew. "You're the one who saw us arrive," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "The one from the rest area." I didn't deny it, didn't see the point. "What do you want?" "To survive," he said. "Same as you." "You're not human." "No, but we're trying to be." He tilted his head at that impossible angle I'd seen before. "It's harder than we thought. Your forms, your behaviors, your emotions. Very complex." "Why truckers?" I asked. "Why start with us?" "Mobile. Isolated. Less likely to be missed immediately." He blinked, but his eyes stayed open a fraction too long. We needed time to learn, to practice. Highway rest areas were perfect, liminal spaces where reality is already thin. Reality is thin, at certain points, places where many people pass through but few remain. Airports, train stations, rest areas. The constant flow of consciousness weakens the barriers, makes it easier for us to cross over. Cross over from where? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was layered, echoing, like multiple beings speaking through one mouth. From a place that no longer exists. Our reality is collapsing, consuming itself. We had no choice but to flee. This was the only world we could reach, the only one similar enough to ours for us to survive in. But you're replacing people, taking their lives. No. He shook his head, the movement still wrong but getting better. We're copying them, learning from them. The originals are elsewhere. Safe, but elsewhere. We needed their forms, their memories, their knowledge of how to exist here. When we're done learning, when we can survive on our own, we'll return them. I wanted to believe him. God help me. I wanted to believe these things were just refugees trying to survive. But then I remembered the terror in that rest area, the wrongness of those fingers under the door, the fake Curtis with his too wide smile. What about the ones who fought back, the ones who ran? The kid's expression didn't change. Mistakes were made. We didn't understand fear at first, didn't realize how it would affect you. We're learning to be better, to be more human. And if you can't learn to be human enough, then we'll fail. And when our reality finishes collapsing, it will take yours with it. Before I could respond, he turned and walked back into the station. Through the window, I watched him resume his position behind the counter, movements already more natural than they'd been minutes before. Learning, adapting, becoming. I drove away with more questions than answers. If what he said was true, if they really were refugees from a dying reality, did that change anything? They were still taking people, still replacing them. But if the alternative was the collapse of both our realities, I needed answers. Real answers, not the half-truths and suspicions I'd been living with. So I did something stupid. I went back to the rest area at mile marker 142. It was 2:47 a.m. when I pulled into the lot. The 5 cars were there, doors open, just like always. But this time I wasn't alone. There were 3 other trucks in the lot, and their drivers were standing by the restroom building. Real drivers, not copies. I recognized 2 of them, Hank Garrett and Wayne Paulson, guys I'd shared coffee with at dozens of truck stops over the years. "Dale?" Hank called out when he saw me. "That you?" I approached cautiously. "Hank, Wayne, what are you doing here?" "Same as you, I reckon," Wayne said. "Trying to make sense of all this insanity. Been comparing notes with other drivers. This place seems to be ground zero for whatever's happening." The third driver, a guy I didn't recognize, stepped forward. "Name's Rex Cooper. Been driving for 23 years, and I've never seen anything like what's been happening these past few weeks." "You've all had encounters?" I asked. They nodded. Hank had seen his own double at a way station in Indiana. Wayne had picked up a hitchhiker who turned out to be someone who'd gone missing 3 months ago, down to the clothes they'd been wearing when they disappeared. Rex had watched an entire convoy of trucks moving in perfect synchronization down I-70, all driven by people with the same blank expression. "We figure it's time we got some answers," Hank said. "And this place seems like the best spot to start." "This is a bad idea," I said. "We should leave. Now." "Can't keep running forever, Dale," Wayne said. "Whatever these things are, they're spreading. Pretty soon there won't be anywhere left to run to." He was right, but that didn't make me feel better about standing in that cursed rest area. The familiar thumping started from the restroom building, that rhythmic banging I'd heard on my first visit. Thump, thump, thump. "What is that?" Rex asked, his hand moving to the pistol on his hip. "That's how it starts," I said. "Every time. Something in there pretends to need help, tries to lure people in." "Well, let's see what happens if we don't take the bait," Hank said. He pulled out a flashlight and shone it on the restroom doors. "We know you're in there. We know you're not human. So how about you come out and we have a civilized conversation?" The thumping stopped. For a long moment there was only silence. Then the men's room door opened and someone stepped out. It was me, or rather it was something that looked exactly like me. Same clothes I was wearing, same trucker's cap, same 3-day stubble. The only difference was the eyes. They were older, more tired, like they'd seen too much. "Hello, Dale," it said in my voice. The other drivers stepped back, hands reaching for weapons, but the thing that looked like me raised its hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to harm anyone. I'm here to show you something." "Show us what?" I asked, my voice shakier than I'd like. "The truth. About what we are. About why we're here. About what's coming." It walked toward the abandoned cars, and against our better judgment, we followed. When it reached the Honda, it placed its hand on the hood. The metal began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt, and suddenly the car wasn't a car anymore. It was a window. Through it, we could see another place, a world that looked like ours, but wrong, like someone had taken reality and twisted it just enough to make it nightmarish. The sky was the color of old blood, and the buildings were geometries that shouldn't exist, folding in on themselves in impossible ways. But it was the things moving through that world that made us all step back. Massive shapes, darker than the darkness around them, consuming everything they touched. Where they passed, reality itself seemed to unravel, leaving nothing but void. "The Devourers," my double said. "They appeared in our reality without warning. We don't know where they came from or what they want. They simply consume. Matter, energy, space, time, everything." The image shifted, showing beings that looked like the things I'd seen at the marshalling yard. Not human, but not monstrous either. Just different. They were fleeing the advancing darkness, crowding around portals like the one I'd seen in Chicago. We had days, maybe hours, before our entire reality was consumed. My double continued. The only escape was to cross over to parallel worlds. Yours was the closest match to ours, the easiest to reach. But we couldn't survive here in our true forms. Your reality would reject us, treat us like an infection, so we had to adapt, to become like you. "By replacing us," Wayne said, his voice hard. "By borrowing from you," my double corrected. "Every person we've copied is safe in a pocket dimension, suspended outside of time, when we've learned enough to survive on our own, to create our own stable forms. We'll return them. No harm done." "No harm?" Hank laughed bitterly. "You've terrorized people, traumatized them. We didn't understand fear at first, or pain, or any of your emotions. We're not just learning to look like you. We're learning to think like you, to feel like you. It's difficult." The window in the Honda flickered and vanished, leaving just an ordinary car again. My double turned to face us, and for the first time, I saw something almost human in its expression. Regret, maybe, or sadness. "But there's a problem," it said. "The Devourers followed us." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rex spoke first. "What do you mean, followed you?" "They can sense the portals we created. It may take them time, months, maybe years. But eventually they'll find their way here. And when they do, this reality will suffer the same fate as ours." So you brought your apocalypse to our world? Hank's hand was on his gun now. We brought hope, my double said. In our reality, we were caught off guard. We had no time to prepare, no chance to fight back. But here, with your resources, your technology, your numbers, we might be able to stop them. How? I asked. By working together, by combining what we know with what you have. The Devourers have weaknesses, patterns we've observed, but we need time to prepare, and we need your cooperation. Our cooperation? Wayne shook his head. You kidnapped people, replaced them, because we didn't know how else to survive. But now we're learning. The ones like me who've achieved stable forms, we can teach the others, guide them, help them integrate without replacing anyone else. But we need your help. I looked at the other drivers. They were scared, angry, confused, same as me. But underneath all that, I saw something else. The recognition that this was bigger than just us, bigger than just our fear. What about the FBI? I asked. They know about you. Some do. We've been in contact with certain elements of your government. Not all are receptive, but some understand the necessity of cooperation. Agent Chen, for instance, has been advocating for a peaceful solution. Chen knew? She suspected. We confirmed her suspicions 3 days ago. She's been working to arrange a meeting between our representatives and your leaders. But there are those in your government who see us only as invaders to be destroyed. They don't understand that we're all facing the same threat now. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dale, this is Chen. I know where you are. Don't trust it. They're not what they claim. Get out now. My double saw me reading the message. She's partially right not to trust us. We haven't been entirely honest, but neither has she. What do you mean? Ask her about Project Threshold. Ask her how long the government has really known about the weak points in reality. Ask her what they found in Nevada in 1987. Another text from Chen. Whatever it's telling you is a manipulation. They're dangerous. Extraction team inbound. I could hear helicopters in the distance getting closer. The other drivers heard them too. We need to go, Hank said. My double shook its head. It's too late for that. They'll be here in minutes. But before they arrive, you need to see one more thing. It walked to the restroom building, to the same door I'd almost opened weeks ago. This time, it pulled it wide open. Inside, instead of a restroom, was a vast space that shouldn't have been able to fit in that small building. Rows and rows of what looked like glass coffins, each containing a person. The real people who'd been replaced. They're all alive, my double said. All safe. All waiting to be returned once we can survive without their forms. This is not an invasion, Dale. It's a rescue mission. We're trying to save both our species. The helicopters were getting louder. I could see lights approaching from the highway, vehicles moving fast. You have to make a choice, my double said. Help us, and we might be able to save both our worlds. Fight us, and we all lose when the Devourers arrive. How do we know you're telling the truth? Wayne demanded. You don't, but consider this. If we wanted to replace you all, truly replace you, would we be having this conversation? We could have taken you the moment you arrived. Instead, we're asking for your help. The first helicopter appeared overhead, searchlight blazing down on us. Government SUVs screeched into the parking lot, agents in tactical gear pouring out. Drop your weapons! Someone shouted through a megaphone. Everyone on the ground, now! My double looked at me one last time. The rest area will remain. The cars will always be here at 2:47 a.m. When you're ready to hear the whole truth, come back. Alone. Then it simply vanished. Not dramatically, not with any special effects. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. The restroom door slammed shut, and when agents kicked it open moments later, it was just a normal restroom again. We spent the next 6 hours being interrogated separately. They wanted to know everything we'd seen, everything the entity had said. Agent Chen questioned me personally, and she looked exhausted, stressed in a way that went beyond just losing sleep. "It told you about Project Threshold," she said. It wasn't a question. "It mentioned it. What is it?" "Classified. Beyond classified. Something that officially doesn't exist. But it does exist." She was quiet for a long moment. "In 1987, we detected an anomaly in Nevada, a point where reality was thin. We've been studying it ever since, trying to understand what it meant. We thought we had decades before it became a problem. But then they showed up. They accelerated everything. Their arrival weakened the barriers further. What might have taken 50 years is now happening in months. The entity, my double, it said you knew the truth, that some in the government want to work with them. Some do. Others want to nuke every rest area from orbit and hope that solves the problem. The truth is, we don't know what the right answer is. We don't know if we can trust them. What do you think?" Chen rubbed her eyes. "I think we're out of our depth. I think we're dealing with something beyond our understanding and we're running out of time to figure it out. And I think they might be telling the truth about the Devourers. You've seen evidence? Residual energy readings at the portal sites. Something came through besides them, something that leaves a very different signature, something that consumes matter at the quantum level. So what do we do? Right now? We watch, we wait, we gather information, and we hope we make the right choice when the time comes." They released us that morning with strict instructions not to discuss what we'd seen, as if we could keep something like this quiet, as if the truth wasn't already spreading across every trucker forum and CB channel in the country. I'm back on the road now, hauling a load of electronics to Seattle. But I can't stop thinking about what my double showed us. The dying world, the fleeing refugees, the approaching Devourers. If it's true, if even half of it is true, then everything we thought we knew about reality is wrong, and that rest area is still out there. Still appearing at 2:47 a.m. with its 5 abandoned cars and impossible doors, waiting for someone to come back, waiting for someone to make a choice. I think I've already made mine. Tomorrow night, I'm going back, alone, like it asked, because if there's even a chance that working with them could save our world, don't I have to take it? The other drivers think I'm crazy. Chen has been calling non-stop, trying to talk me out of it. But someone has to be the first to extend trust. Someone has to take the risk. Might as well be a middle-aged trucker from Ohio who's seen too much to pretend the world makes sense anymore. If you're reading this and I don't update again, you'll know what happened. Either I was wrong to trust them or I was right, and I'm somewhere learning how to fight Devourers. Either way, remember this. The world is stranger than we know, and sometimes the monsters aren't the real threat. Sometimes they're just refugees, same as anyone else, trying to survive in a universe that doesn't make sense. And sometimes the real horror is what's chasing them. I went back. Of course I went back. How could I not? It was 2:47 a.m., 3 nights after the confrontation with the FBI. I'd driven around aimlessly for hours, trying to talk myself out of it, but something kept pulling me toward that rest area. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was duty, or maybe it was just the trucker in me that couldn't leave a mystery unsolved on the highway I'd called home for over a decade. The 5 cars were there, as always, but this time the doors were closed. The engines were running, exhaust visible in the cold October air. Through the windows I could see people sitting inside, not moving, not looking around, just sitting there staring straight ahead. I parked my rig and climbed down. No flashlight this time. The overhead lights were bright enough and somehow I knew I wouldn't need it. As I approached the Honda, the driver's door opened and my double stepped out. It looked even more like me now. The mannerisms were perfect. down to the way I unconsciously touched my wedding ring when I was nervous, even though my divorce had been final for 3 years. "You came back," it said in my voice. "I wasn't sure you would. I need to know the truth. All of it. The truth is complicated, and showing you will be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable since the first night I stopped here." It almost smiled, a sad, tired expression I'd seen in my own mirror too many times. "Very well. But once you know everything, you can't unknow it. Your reality will never be the same." My reality hasn't been the same since I saw those fingers under the door. This time it did smile. "No, I suppose it hasn't. Come." It led me to the restroom building. The other car doors opened and their occupants got out. A suburban family, an elderly couple, a businessman, a teenage girl, all watching us with those two knowing eyes. "These are the originals," my double said. "The first ones we copied back in 1974. "That's impossible. They haven't aged. Time works differently in the spaces between realities. For them, it's been days. For you, decades." The businessman stepped forward. He looked like he was from the 70s. Wide tie, sideburns, the works. "My name is Richard Henley. I was driving to a conference in Chicago when I stopped here to use the restroom. That was yesterday? The day before? Time is strange here." "You've been missing for nearly 50 years, I told him. His face went pale. 50. My wife, my kids, they're being cared for," my double said gently. "All of your families are. We've been watching over them, ensuring they prosper. It was the least we could do." "You've been controlling their lives?" "Guiding, protecting, anonymous scholarships for the children, job opportunities for the spouses, medical interventions when needed. We couldn't return you without revealing ourselves, but we could ensure your absence didn't destroy those you left behind." The teenage girl spoke up. "They told us everything. About their world, about what's coming. They're not the monsters here." "Then what are they?" My double gestured to the restroom door. "Come inside. See for yourself." This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked through that door, and reality folded around me like origami being undone. The small restroom became a vast space, impossibly huge, filled with levels and platforms that extended beyond sight. It was like being inside an M.C. Escher painting, if Escher had designed truck stops. Thousands of beings moved through the space. Some looked human, perfect copies like my double. Others were in transitional forms, partially transformed, and others were in their true shapes. Beautiful and terrible, geometric patterns of light and thought that hurt to look at directly. "This is a way station," my double explained. "One of hundreds we've established in the thin places of your reality. From here, we can monitor both worlds, track the Devourer's approach, and coordinate our integration." "Integration, not invasion?" "We have no interest in conquering your world. We need to become part of it, to blend seamlessly until we're indistinguishable from native humans. Only then can we work together to prevent what's coming." It led me to what looked like a command center. Screens, or what my brain interpreted as screens, showed various locations across the country. Rest areas, truck stops, abandoned warehouses. Each one a point where reality was thin enough for them to operate. "This is bigger than just the highways," I said. "Much bigger. But truckers were our first point of contact for a reason. You traverse the liminal spaces regularly. You're already comfortable with the strange, the unexplained. And you have a network, informal but effective, that spreads information quickly." "The truckers telegraph." "Exactly. Every story shared at a truck stop, every CB conversation about weird encounters, it prepared your community for this moment. You've been our unwitting ambassadors, spreading awareness that something unprecedented was happening. On one of the screens, I saw the marshalling yard in Chicago, but now it was transformed, fortified with structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. What is that? Our first fortress. When the Devourers arrive, it will be our primary defensive position. We're building others, but quietly. Your government knows about some, pretends not to know about others. And if the defenses fail, then both our species face extinction. My double turned to face me directly. But there's something else, something we haven't told your government. The screen changed, showing a map of the United States covered in pulsing lights, thousands of them scattered across every state. Every light represents one of us who is successfully integrated. Truckers, gas station attendants, diner workers, mechanics, people in the mobile infrastructure of your nation. We chose these roles specifically. Why? Because when the Devourers come, evacuation will be crucial. We need people who know the roads, who can move supplies, who can keep the lifelines of civilization running even in chaos. Every trucker we've replaced or copied is being trained, whether they know it or not, for the largest evacuation in human history. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. You're preparing for war. We're preparing for survival. The war is inevitable. It followed us here. But with your world's resources and our knowledge, we might win, or at least survive long enough to find another solution. A new being approached us, one that hadn't taken human form. It was beautiful in an alien way, patterns of light flowing through crystalline structures that might have been its body. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere and nowhere. "Show him the probability matrices," it said. My double hesitated. That might be too much. He needs to see. They all need to see. The screens changed again, showing branching paths like a massive tree. Each branch represented a possible future, glowing with different intensities. These are the possible outcomes based on our current models, my double explained. The brightest paths are the most likely. Most of the branches ended in darkness. In 87% of probable futures, the Devourers consume this reality within 50 years, the crystalline being stated. In 11%, we manage to hold them off, but at the cost of transforming Earth into a permanent battlefield. Only in 2% of futures do both our species survive and thrive. 2%? But that percentage increases with certain factors. Full cooperation between our species raises it to 8%. Immediate cessation of hostilities and beginning of joint defense preparations raises it to 15%. And there's one factor that could raise it even higher. What factor? My double and the crystalline being exchanged what I can only describe as a look, though the alien had no eyes that I could see. You, my double said, and others like you. The bridges. I don't understand. Some humans can serve as conduits between our species, not physically, but conceptually. You help us understand humanity in ways that simple copying cannot achieve. And more importantly, you help humanity understand us. Every trucker who's encountered us and lived, every person who's seen beyond the fear to recognize what we really are. You're the key to that 2% becoming something more. That's why you kept the rest area running. You were looking for people who would come back. People brave enough or curious enough to seek truth rather than run from it. We found 17 so far. You're the 18th. What happened to the others? They're working with us. Some openly, like your friend Curtis. Curtis? But he quit trucking. A cover story. He's been helping us establish safe houses across Arkansas and Oklahoma. Places where newly arrived refugees from our world can learn to integrate without the traumatic encounters that marked our early attempts. I thought about Curtis, how scared he'd been that night, how he'd sworn he was done with all of this. He chose to help you? After we returned the person whose form we'd copied, yes. He understood that fear had made our first interactions disastrous, but that our intentions were never hostile. The suburban family from outside had followed us in. The father, or the being copying a father's form, spoke up. My name was David Chen. I was a teacher before they copied me. When they explained what was happening, what was at stake, I volunteered to stay and help. My family thinks I died in a car accident. It's better that way. You gave up your life? I gave up one life to possibly save billions. Seemed like good math to me. The teenage girl nodded. Same here. I was nobody special, just a kid driving to college. But here, I can help save 2 worlds. How could I say no to that? I looked around at all of them, beings from another reality wearing human faces, humans who'd chosen to help them, all working together in this impossible space between worlds. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it was oddly hopeful. What do you need from me? I asked. My double smiled, a real smile this time, full of relief and something like hope. Keep driving. Keep your eyes open. Report what you see. And when the time comes, and it will come soon, help us coordinate the evacuation. Evacuation to where? We're working on that. There are other thin places, other realities we might be able to reach, but first we need to survive the initial assault. When will they get here? The Devourers? The crystalline being pulsed with different colors. Our best estimates say between 6 months and 2 years. The portals we use to escape created ripples they can follow, but the distance between realities is vast even for them. So we have time to prepare. Some? Not enough, but some. My double led me back toward the exit. As we walked, I saw more of the space, training areas where beings practiced their human forms, communication centers coordinating with others of their kind around the world, and in one section, what looked like a hospital where humans who'd been injured in encounters were being treated. We're not perfect, my double admitted, seeing where I was looking. Mistakes have been made, people have been hurt, but we're trying to make amends. The FBI, do they know about all this? Some do. Agent Chen, no relation to David, has been here. She's seen what you're seeing, but there are factions within your government. Some want to use us as weapons. Others want to destroy us. A few, like Chen, want to find a path to coexistence. And if the hardliners win, then we all lose. The energy required to fight both your species and the Devourers would leave us too weak to mount an effective defense. That's why we need people like you, trusted voices in the community who can speak to what we really are. We reached the door. Outside, I could see the 5 cars, still running, still waiting. The cars, I said. Why always the same 5? Anchors. They hold this space stable, prevent it from drifting too far from your reality. They were the first vehicles we successfully copied, and they've become quantum locked to this location. As long as they exist here, this way station remains accessible. And if someone destroyed them, then this pocket would collapse, killing everyone inside and possibly creating a rift that the Devourers could exploit to arrive sooner. So you're vulnerable. Extremely. That's the other reason we need allies. Protection. I stepped outside, back into the normal world. The transition was jarring, from the vast, impossible space to a mundane rest area in Ohio. The others followed, the humans who'd chosen to stay and help. You can leave, David Chen told me. Drive away, forget this happened. We won't stop you or follow you. But if you choose to help, if you choose to be a bridge between our worlds, we'll be here, every night at 2:47 a.m. Why that specific time? That's when the barriers are thinnest here, when our first scout successfully crossed over. Time has meaning in ways your physics hasn't discovered yet. I looked at them all. These impossible beings trying to save themselves and us. These humans who'd sacrificed everything to help. The smart thing would be to leave, to pretend none of this was real. But I'd never been particularly smart. "I'll help," I said, "but on one condition." "Name it," my double said. "No more replacing people without their consent. You want to copy someone's form, you ask first. You explain what's happening. You give them a choice. That will slow our integration significantly. Without perfect copies, we'll be discovered more easily. Maybe, but it's the right thing to do. If we're going to face the end of the world together, we need to trust each other, and trust starts with honesty." My double was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed. It will make things harder, but perhaps that's what we need. The easy path led to fear and misunderstanding. Perhaps the harder path will lead to something better." I headed back to my truck, my head spinning with everything I'd learned. As I climbed into the cab, my double called out one more time. "Dale, there's something else. The Devourers, they're not just mindless destroyers. They're looking for something. Something that exists in realities like ours." "What?" "We don't know. But whatever it is, they'll consume everything to find it. Unless we stop them first." I started my engine and pulled out of the rest area. In my mirrors, I watched the 5 cars fade into the darkness. By the time the next driver passed by, they'd be gone. The rest area empty and normal. Until 2:47 a.m. came around again. I drove for the rest of the night, thinking about everything I'd seen and heard. When dawn broke, I pulled into a truck stop and did something I hadn't done in years. I called my ex-wife. "Dale?" She sounded surprised. "It's 6 in the morning." "I know, I'm sorry, I needed to hear your voice." "Are you okay? You sound strange." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Listen, Sarah, if I told you to pack up and be ready to leave at a moment's notice, would you trust me?" "Dale, you're scaring me." "I know. And I can't explain everything right now. But something's coming, and when it does, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" There was a long pause. "You haven't asked me to trust you in 5 years." "I know. I'm asking now." "Okay. Okay, Dale. If you say to run, I'll run." "Thank you. And Sarah, stock up on supplies. Water, non-perishables, first aid. Tell your friends to do the same. Don't make a big deal about it, just be prepared." "Dale, what's going on?" "The world's changing, Sarah, faster than anyone realizes. But maybe if we're smart and lucky and brave, we'll get through it." I hung up and looked around the truck stop. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that their reality was about to collide with something beyond imagination. Part of me envied them. But another part, the part that had stood in that impossible space between worlds, felt privileged to know the truth. I ordered coffee and opened my laptop, logging into the largest trucker forum I knew. It was time to start spreading the word, carefully, subtly. Not enough to cause panic, but enough to prepare. Because if those probability matrices were right, we had maybe 2 years before everything changed. The post I wrote was simple. "Fellow drivers, keep your eyes open out there. Things are getting strange on the highways, and they're going to get stranger. If you see something unusual at a rest area, don't panic. Don't shoot. Try to understand. We're all in this together, even the things that don't look like us. The road ahead is going to be rough, but if we help each other, we might just make it through. Keep your tanks full, your loads secure, and watch out for each other. The convoy's about to get a lot bigger." Within an hour, the responses started coming in. Other drivers sharing their own strange encounters, asking questions, offering support. The network was activating, the underground railroad of information that had connected truckers for generations. I closed the laptop and got back on the road. There were still deliveries to make, miles to cover, normal life to maintain. But now I had a second job, preparing for the impossible, building bridges between worlds, and helping humanity get ready for the greatest challenge we'd ever faced. The Devourers were coming, but we wouldn't face them alone. We had allies, strange as they might be. And if a bunch of truckers could accept the impossible and work with beings from another reality, maybe the rest of humanity could too. The highway stretched out before me, endless and full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, at rest areas and truck stops across the country, first contact was happening over and over again. Some encounters would go badly, driven by fear and misunderstanding, but others would go right, building the connections we'd need to survive. I thought about that rest area at mile marker 142, appearing night after night at 2:47 a.m. A doorway between worlds, a bridge between species, a hope for survival in the face of annihilation. It had started as a source of terror, but now I understood it for what it really was: a lifeline. The radio crackled to life. "Breaker, breaker. This is Missouri Mike. Anyone else seeing these convoys of identical trucks? Must be 30 of them, all moving in perfect sync." I picked up the handset. "This is Ohio Dale. I see them too, Mike. Don't worry about it. They're friendlies." "Friendlies? Dale, what the hell's going on out here?" "The world's getting bigger, Mike. Bigger and stranger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. But we're adapting. We're surviving. We're finding new roads through the dark." "You sound like you know something." "I know enough. Keep your eyes open, Mike. Watch for the signs. And if you find yourself at a rest area at 2:47 a.m. and see something impossible, don't run. Stop and listen. You might be surprised by what you learn." I hung up the handset and kept driving. In my mirrors, I could see them now, the other trucks moving in formation, some driven by humans who knew the truth, others by beings learning to be human. All of us heading toward an uncertain future, but at least heading there together. The rest area would be there tonight, and every night, waiting for the next person brave enough to stop and see beyond the fear. Each one who did increased our chances, even if only by a fraction of a percent. And maybe, just maybe, those fractions would add up to survival. The sun was fully up now, painting the Ohio countryside in gold and green. It was beautiful, worth fighting for, worth saving. Both our species had found something worth protecting in this reality, and that gave me hope. Because if there's one thing truckers understand, it's that the longest journeys are made 1 mile at a time. And we had a very long journey ahead of us, but at least we wouldn't be traveling alone. My name's Randy Bowman, and I've been hauling freight across the Midwest for 18 years. 18 years of following the same routes, stopping at the same truck stops, seeing the same faces behind the same counters. You develop a rhythm after that long, a sense of what's normal and what ain't. That's why I knew something was wrong the moment my GPS started acting up on that foggy Tuesday night in rural Indiana. I was running a load of frozen goods from Fort Wayne to Evansville, a straight shot down US 41 that I'd made probably 50 times before. Should have been simple: 6 hours of mindless driving through cornfields and small towns, maybe a stop for coffee in Terre Haute. But around 11 p.m., just south of Lafayette, my GPS started recalculating. "Turn right in 500 feet, the synthetic voice announced. I looked at the screen, confused. There was no turn coming up, just empty fields on both sides of the highway. But the GPS insisted, showing a road that definitely wasn't there. "Recalculating," it said when I passed the invisible turn. "Make a U-turn when possible." I've had GPS units go wonky before, It happens when you're constantly crossing state lines and dealing with construction zones. Usually, I just ignore it and follow the signs. But this time was different. The screen started showing roads I'd never seen before, a whole network of highways that didn't match anything I could see through my windshield. Then the fog rolled in. It came out of nowhere, thick as cotton and glowing slightly in my headlights. One moment I could see half a mile ahead. The next, I could barely see past my hood. I slowed down to 30, hazards on, white-knuckling the steering wheel. "Turn right now," the GPS commanded. This time there was a road. A narrow two-lane that I swear hadn't been there 30 seconds earlier. The rational part of my brain said to keep going straight, stick to US 41, wait for the fog to clear. But something about that road called to me. Maybe it was the way it seemed to glow slightly in the fog, or maybe it was just curiosity about where my malfunctioning GPS thought I should go. I turned. The moment my truck left the highway, everything changed. The fog was still there, but it was different, lighter, almost luminescent. The road surface was too smooth, like it had just been paved, but there were no construction signs, no smell of fresh asphalt. My GPS screen flickered and showed my location as Harmonville, Indiana. I'd been driving Indiana roads for nearly 2 decades. There was no town called Harmonville. The road wound through what should have been cornfields but looked more like wheat, except wheat that seemed to shimmer and move without any wind. After about 3 miles, I saw lights ahead. Street lights, shop signs, the glow of windows. A town materialized out of the fog like something from a dream. The sign at the town limits read, "Welcome to Harmonville. Population 2,847. Established 1952. I pulled out my phone to check Google Maps, but I had no signal. Not weak signal, no signal at all. The screen showed no service, where the carrier name should be. The town's main street looked like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Perfect storefronts with hand-painted signs, flower boxes under every window, American flags hanging limp in the still air. But it was nearly midnight, and every business was lit up like it was noon. Through the windows I could see people shopping, eating in diners, getting haircuts. All at midnight on a Tuesday. I needed to turn around, get back to the highway, but the street was too narrow for my 18-wheeler. I'd have to find a place to turn around, maybe a parking lot or a side street. I kept driving slowly through town, looking for an opportunity. That's when I noticed the people noticing me. They didn't just glance at my truck the way people usually do. They stopped what they were doing and stared. A man getting a haircut turned in his chair to watch me pass. A woman carrying shopping bags stood frozen on the sidewalk. Kids playing in a yard, at midnight, stopped mid-game to track my movement. They were all smiling, every single one of them. Not natural smiles either, but the kind you'd see in a yearbook photo. Forced, held too long, involving only the mouth and not the eyes. I finally found a large parking lot behind what looked like a grocery store. As I was backing up to turn around, someone knocked on my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a man in his 50s, wearing clothes that looked straight out of the 1950s. Wool slacks, white shirt, thin black tie. His smile was so wide it looked painful. "Hello there, friend," he called out, voice artificially cheerful. "Don't see many big rigs in Harmonville. You lost?" I rolled down my window partway. "Yeah, GPS sent me the wrong way. Just trying to get back to 41. His smile somehow got wider. "Oh, that's a shame. GPS units always have trouble finding us. We're kind of off the beaten path, you might say. But since you're here, why don't you stay for a bite? Rosie's Diner makes the best pie in Indiana, and they're open all night." "Thanks, but I need to get back on the road. Got a deadline." "Nonsense. You can't drive in this fog. It's dangerous out there. Much safer to wait it out here in town. We've got a nice motel, very reasonable rates. I'm Gary, by the way. Gary Henderson. I'm what passes for the mayor around here." Everything about this felt wrong. The midnight sunshine of activity, the 1950s aesthetic, the way Gary's eyes never seemed to blink. But he was right about one thing. The fog was dangerous. Maybe waiting it out wasn't the worst idea. "How long does the fog usually last?" I asked. "Oh, it comes and goes. Should clear up by morning. Come on, let me buy you a cup of coffee at least. You look tired, and Rosie's coffee could wake the dead." He laughed at his own joke, a sound like grinding gears trying to mimic human mirth. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the coffee. I figured I could ask around, maybe find out what was really going on in this place. I pulled my truck into a proper parking space and followed Gary down the street to Rosie's Diner. The inside was exactly what you'd expect from a 1950s diner. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floor, chrome everything. A jukebox in the corner played Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes. The place was packed, every booth and stool occupied by people eating full meals at what was now past midnight. Gary led me to the only empty booth right by the window. A waitress appeared immediately. Blonde, beehive hairdo, pink uniform, that same painful smile. "What can I get you boys?" she asked, pencil poised over her notepad. "Coffee for me, Diane," Gary said. "And for our new friend?" "Just coffee," I said. "Oh, you have to try the pie," Diane insisted. "Rosie made apple, cherry, and rhubarb fresh this evening. Just coffee, thanks." Her smile flickered for just a moment like a TV with bad reception. "Of course. 2 coffees coming right up." She glided away, and I noticed she wasn't the only waitress. There were 3 others, all with the same hairstyle, same uniform, same smile. They moved in perfect synchronization, like they were choreographed. "So," Gary said, settling into the booth, "what brings you through Indiana? Besides our troublesome GPS coordinates, of course." "Just hauling freight. Frozen goods from Fort Wayne to Evansville." "Frozen goods? How modern. We don't get many refrigerated trucks here. Most of our deliveries come by regular truck. Old-fashioned, you might say." "When do you get deliveries? I didn't see any industrial areas coming in." "Oh, we're very self-sufficient here in Harmonville. Grow our own food, make our own clothes. We like to keep things simple, traditional." Diane returned with our coffees. The mug was burning hot, but the coffee inside was exactly body temperature. It tasted like coffee-flavored water, as if someone had described coffee to someone who'd never tasted it and they'd tried to recreate it. "Good, isn't it?" Gary asked, taking a big sip of his own. "Rosie's special blend." I nodded, pretending to drink while actually just touching the mug to my lips. Through the window, I could see people walking by on the sidewalk. They all moved at exactly the same pace, arms swinging at identical angles like a parade of wind-up toys. "Gary," I said carefully, "what year do you think it is?" He laughed that grinding gear laugh again. "What year? Why, it's 2024, of course. Though sometimes it does feel like time moves differently here in Harmonville. Slower, you might say. More peaceful. But everything here looks like it's from the 1950s. We appreciate the classics. Good, wholesome values. None of that modern nonsense with everyone staring at their phones, ignoring their neighbors. Here in Harmonville, we take care of each other. We're one big happy family." A bell chimed, and everyone in the diner turned to look at the door in perfect unison. A young couple walked in, the man in a Letterman jacket, the woman in a poodle skirt. They waved at the room, and everyone waved back with identical motions. "Tommy! Sandra!" Gary called out. "Come meet our visitor." They walked over, holding hands, smiling those painful smiles. Up close, I noticed something odd about their skin. It was too perfect, no pores, no blemishes, like they were made of wax. "Pleased to meet you," Tommy said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm but wrong. His hand was the same temperature as the coffee, exactly body temperature, and his skin felt like latex.
"Randy,"
I managed.
"nice to meet you too. Are you staying long?"
Sandra asked. Her voice had a slight echo, like two people speaking in almost perfect unison.
"Just until the fog clears." "Oh, that could be a while,"
she said, her smile never wavering.
"The fog likes to linger around Harmonville. Sometimes it stays for days, weeks even."
"But that's okay. We have everything you could need right here."
"My delivery..."
"Can wait," Gary interrupted. "Your company will understand. Weather delays happen all the time. Besides, when's the last time you took a real break? Enjoyed some genuine hospitality?" The bell chimed again. This time, a family of 5 entered. Parents and 3 children, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a 1950s catalog. The children moved with the same synchronized precision as the adults, their smiles just as wide and empty. "I should really check on my truck," I said, starting to stand. Gary's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was impossibly strong, and his skin felt even more artificial up close. Now, he said, his smile never faltering. "You just got here. It would be rude to leave so soon. Besides, your truck is perfectly safe. Nothing bad ever happens in Harmonville." I pulled my hand free and stood up anyway. "Thanks for the coffee. I'll grab a room at that motel you mentioned and head out first thing in the morning." "The Harmonville Motor Lodge," Gary said, bouncing up as well. "Excellent choice. I'll walk you over. Make sure you get the best room." "I can find it." "Nonsense. What kind of mayor would I be if I didn't personally ensure our visitors were comfortable?" We left the diner, and I noticed everyone watched us go, their heads turning in perfect synchronization to track our movement. Outside, the fog had gotten thicker, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. The street lights created halos of light that seemed to pulse slightly, like a heartbeat. The motel was 2 blocks away, a single-story building with doors facing a parking lot. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. Harmonville Motor Lodge, vacancy. Given how many people I'd seen in town, I found it hard to believe they got many visitors. The office was manned by an elderly woman who could have been Diane's grandmother. Same hairstyle, same smile, same uniform, but in blue instead of pink. "Room for one?" she asked before we'd even gotten through the door. "Yes, just for tonight," I said. "Oh, we'll see about that," she said, with what I think was supposed to be a playful wink. "Harmonville has a way of growing on people. Some folks come for a night and stay for years." She handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a card, attached to a diamond-shaped plastic tag with Room 7 embossed on it. "That'll be $12, she said. $12? For the whole night?" "We like to keep prices reasonable here. None of that big city gouging." I handed her a 20, and she gave me back exactly 8 $1 bills, all crispy and new, all from 1952. I looked at them closely. They were real, just old, or perfectly reproduced. "Gary, the man needs his rest," the woman said. "You can give him the full tour tomorrow." "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. Sleep well, Randy. Tomorrow you'll see why Harmonville is the best-kept secret in Indiana." They both stood there, smiling, waiting for me to go to my room. I walked down the row to Room 7, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a 1950s motel. Twin bed, small TV with rabbit ears, rotary phone on the nightstand. Everything was clean, but felt frozen in time. I looked out the window and saw Gary and Mrs. Patterson still standing in the same spot, facing my room, smiling. They stood there for 5 more minutes before finally walking away in perfect synchronization. I sat on the bed, trying to process what I'd stumbled into. This wasn't just some quirky small town with a retro theme. Something was fundamentally wrong with Harmonville and everyone in it. The way they moved, the way they talked, the way their skin felt. None of it was quite human. I tried my phone again. still no signal. The room phone had no dial tone. The TV, when I turned it on, only showed static on every channel except one, which played a loop of what looked like a local Harmonville news program from 1955. I needed to get out of here, fog or no fog. I grabbed my keys and opened the door. The entire town was standing in the parking lot. Every person I'd seen in the diner, on the street, everyone. They stood in perfect rows, all facing my room, all smiling those terrible smiles. In the center of the crowd was Gary, still in his 1950s attire. "Going somewhere, Randy?" he asked, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "The night's not safe for traveling. So much can go wrong on unfamiliar roads. Accidents happen. People disappear. Sometimes they're never found." "Sometimes," the crowd said in perfect unison, "they find a better place." "A happier place," Gary continued. "A harmonious place," the crowd responded. "Come back inside, Randy. Rest. Tomorrow you'll understand everything. Tomorrow you might even decide to stay." "Everyone stays," the crowd chanted. "Everyone stays in Harmonville." I stood frozen in my doorway, keys clutched in my hand as the crowd continued to stare and smile. Then, as if responding to some unheard signal, they all turned and walked away, dispersing into the fog in perfect formation. I went back inside and locked the door, shoving the chair under the doorknob for good measure. Through the window, I could see a figure standing under the streetlight across from my room. They stood there all night, unmoving, watching. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat on the bed, fully dressed, truck keys in my hand, waiting for dawn and praying the fog would clear. But even as the sky began to lighten outside, the fog remained, thick as ever. And I was starting to understand that maybe the fog wasn't keeping me here by accident. Maybe Harmonville didn't want me to leave. Maybe no one ever left Harmonville. Dawn came, but it didn't bring relief. The fog was still there, maybe even thicker than before. Through my motel room window, I could see Main Street coming to life, if you could call it that. People emerged from buildings like clockwork, all at exactly 6 a.m., all walking to their destinations with that same synchronized gait. I'd spent the night studying every inch of the room, looking for something, anything that might explain what Harmonville really was. The Gideon Bible in the nightstand was wrong. The verses were almost right, but not quite, like someone had tried to recreate it from memory. In the beginning was the harmony, and the harmony was with God, and the harmony was God. The phone book, who still had phone books, listed hundreds of names, all with the same handful of last names repeated: Henderson, Patterson, Wilson, Baker, Smith. The addresses were all variations of the same few street names: Main, Elm, Oak, Harmony. At 7 a.m. sharp, someone knocked on my door. "Mr. Bowman, it's Diane from the diner. I brought you breakfast." I hadn't ordered breakfast. I approached the door carefully. "Thanks, but I'm not hungry." "Oh, but you have to eat. It's the most important meal of the day. And Rosie made her special pancakes just for you." "Leave it outside. I'll get it in a minute." There was a pause. "Mr. Bowman, that would be rude. In Harmonville, we believe in proper hospitality. Person to person, face to face." I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. Diane stood there with the tray, still wearing that pink uniform, still smiling that painful smile. But in the morning light, I could see more details I'd missed the night before. Her skin had a subtle sheen to it, like plastic. Her eyes never actually focused on me. They seemed to look through me at some fixed point. "I'm really not hungry," I said. "Everyone's hungry in the morning," she replied, her voice taking on a strange insistence.
Everyone eats breakfast in Harmonville. It's what people do. Normal people, you mean? Her smile flickered again. Yes, normal people. Like us. Like you're going to be. That last part sent ice through my veins. What did you say? I said you're going to eat breakfast, aren't you? She pushed the tray toward the gap in the door. The smell of pancakes and syrup wafted through, but underneath it was something else. Something chemical, like formaldehyde. I need to check on my truck, I said, closing the door. Your truck is fine, she called through the door. Gary made sure of it. He's waiting for you at the diner when you're ready for that tour. Don't keep him waiting too long. Gary doesn't like to be kept waiting. I heard her footsteps walking away, but she was wearing heels, and they clicked in a perfect rhythm, like a metronome. I waited another 10 minutes, then carefully opened the door. The tray was still there, the food looking perfect, but wrong. The pancakes were too circular, the butter pats too square, the syrup too glossy. I left it there and headed for my truck. The parking lot was empty except for my rig, which looked untouched. But when I climbed up to check the cab, I found something that made my blood run cold. My logbook was open on the passenger seat, and someone had filled in entries for the next 3 days. All showing stops in Harmonville. All in my handwriting, but I hadn't written them. I started the engine. It turned over fine, but when I put it in gear and tried to move, the truck lurched forward about a foot and died. I tried again. Same result. The fuel gauge showed full. All the indicators were normal, but the truck wouldn't run for more than a second. Engine trouble? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Gary was standing right beside my door, having approached without making a sound. It was running fine last night, I said. Machines are funny things. Sometimes they just know when it's time to rest, like people. You look tired, Randy. Did you sleep at all? Not much? The first night in a new place is always hard. But don't worry. Tonight will be easier. Tomorrow even more so. By the third night, you'll sleep like a baby. Everyone does. I need to call my dispatcher, let them know about the delay. Oh, I'm afraid our phone lines are down.
The fog, you know, interferes with all sorts of communications.
But don't worry. I sent a message on your behalf. Your company knows you're safe and sound in Harmonville. How? How did you send a message if the phones are down? His smile widened impossibly. We have our ways. Now come on. Let me show you around properly. You'll love our town once you get to know it. I climbed down from the truck, mainly because I wanted to keep Gary in sight. He led me down Main Street, pointing out shops and buildings with the enthusiasm of a proud parent. There's Wilson's Hardware, been in the same family for 3 generations. And Baker's Bakery. Yes, the baker's name is Baker. Isn't that delightful?
Oh, and our library. You must see our library. The library was a small brick building that looked older than the supposed 1952 founding date of the town. Inside, it was dead silent, despite having at least a dozen people reading at tables. They all looked up when we entered, smiled in unison, then returned to their books. I walked over to one of the shelves and pulled out a random book. The cover said To Kill a Mockingbird, but when I opened it, every page was blank. I tried another, The Great Gatsby. Also blank. Every book I checked was the same. Real covers, empty pages. We prefer to tell our own stories here, Gary said, suddenly right behind me. Outside stories can be so disruptive. These aren't books, they're props. They're possibilities, he corrected, waiting to be filled with better stories, harmonious stories. Gary, what is this place? Really? He tilted his head at that unnatural angle. It's home, Randy. It's where people come to be happy, to be part of something greater than themselves. People don't come here. You trap them here. Trap is such an ugly word. We invite, we welcome, we integrate. And if I want to leave, why would you want to leave? Everything you need is here. Food, shelter,
community, purpose. My purpose is delivering frozen goods to Evansville. Such a small purpose. Here, you could be part of maintaining harmony itself. You could help others find their way here, just as you found yours. I didn't find my way. My GPS malfunctioned. Gary laughed. GPS, coincidence, fate. Does it matter what we call it? You're here now. That's what matters. We left the library and continued the tour. Every person we passed greeted us with the same phrase, "Beautiful morning in Harmonville." Even the children who should have been in school were walking the streets, shopping with their parents, all wearing those perfect smiles. "Don't the kids go to school?" I asked. "Every day is school in Harmonville. We learn from each other constantly. Traditional education is so limiting, don't you think?" We passed by what should have been the town limits, but the road just ended at a wall of fog. Beyond it, I couldn't see anything. Not fields, not forest, just impenetrable white. "Where does the fog come from?" I asked. "It's always been here," Gary said. "As long as Harmonville has existed, the fog has protected us, kept us safe from the chaos outside, and kept people from leaving. People don't want to leave once they understand, once they become part of the harmony." "What does that mean exactly? Becoming part of the harmony?" Gary's smile somehow got even wider. "Let me show you." He led me to a building I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe it hadn't been there before. It was larger than the others, with no windows and a single door. The sign above read, Harmonville Community Center. Inside was a single vast room with a stage at one end. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all showing people at various town events. But in every photo, everyone had the same expression, the same posture, the same smile. "We gather here every evening," Gary explained. "The whole town. We share our experiences, our thoughts, our feelings. We synchronize." Synchronize? "We ensure everyone is in harmony. No conflicts, no disagreements, no discord, just perfect unity." On the stage was a strange device. It looked like a cross between an old radio transmitter and a pipe organ. Wires ran from it into the walls, disappearing into the structure of the building. "What is that?" I asked. "The harmonizer. Our founder, Dr. Eugene Hartwell, invented it in 1952. He was a visionary, understood that human conflict came from individual thought, individual desire. But if everyone thought together, wanted together, moved together, imagine the peace, Randy. Imagine the perfection. That's not peace. That's mind control." Such dramatic words. It's harmony. It's unity. It's what humanity was meant to be before ego and selfishness corrupted us. I backed toward the door, but it had closed behind us. "You're all being controlled by that machine? We're all connected through it. One mind, many bodies. One purpose, many hands to achieve it. And soon, Randy, you'll understand. Tonight, at the gathering, you'll experience true harmony for the first time." "I'm not going to any gathering." "Oh, but you are. Everyone in Harmonville attends the gathering. It's what we do. It's who we are." I pushed past him and grabbed the door handle. It wouldn't budge. "The door will open when it's time," Gary said calmly. "Everything happens when it's time in Harmonville. You can't keep me prisoner." "Prisoner? You're our guest, our newest friend, soon to be our newest family member. You should be honored. Not everyone gets invited to Harmonville. Only those who are already searching for something, those who are already lost." "I wasn't lost. I was following my GPS. Your GPS, which mysteriously led you to a town that doesn't appear on any map. A town that shouldn't exist but does. Doesn't that seem like more than coincidence to you?" The door suddenly clicked open. Outside, the fog had rolled back slightly, and I could see the entire population of Harmonville walking toward the community center, all in perfect step, all with those empty smiles. "The gathering is beginning.
Gary said. "Your attendance is requested." I bolted, ran as fast as I could toward the parking lot where my truck was. But the streets had changed. Where the motel should have been was now a park. Where my truck had been parked was now a fountain. The layout of the entire town had shifted while I was inside the community center. "Looking for something?" Diane stood behind me, still in her waitress uniform, but now there were dozens of her, not similar-looking women, but exact duplicates, all standing in a circle around me. "We thought you might try to run," they said in unison. "People always do at first, but there's nowhere to go, Randy. Harmonville is all there is now. My truck is being harmonized," all the Dianes said. "Soon it will run only on Harmonville roads, stop only at Harmonville stops. Like you, it will find its purpose here." The crowd from the community center was approaching now, hundreds of people moving as one organism. In the center was Gary, carrying something that looked like a crown made of the same wires that connected to the harmonizer. "It's time, Randy," he called out. "Time to stop fighting. Time to stop being alone. Time to join the harmony." They were closing in from all sides. I looked for any escape route, any gap in the crowd, but there was none. They moved with perfect coordination, cutting off every possible exit. "You'll thank us," Gary said, now just a few feet away. "Everyone does, once they understand. Once they feel the peace of never having to make another decision, another choice, never having to be alone with your thoughts again." "That's not living," I shouted. "That's being a robot." "It's being perfect," the crowd responded in unison. "It's being eternal. It's being happy." Gary raised the wire crown. "Welcome to Harmonville, Randy. Welcome to forever." I did the only thing I could think of. I charged straight at Gary, knocked him down, and grabbed the crown. The moment my hands touched it, I felt it. The harmonizer's pull. Thousands of thoughts that weren't mine flooding my consciousness, trying to drown out my own inner voice. "Join us. Be one. Be harmony." I threw the crown as hard as I could and ran toward the community center. If that machine was controlling them, maybe destroying it would break their hold. The crowd followed, but their perfect synchronization was slightly off now, like I'd introduced a discordant note into their symphony. Inside the community center, the harmonizer was humming, glowing with an eerie light. I looked for something to smash it with and found a fire axe on the wall. As I raised it, Gary appeared in the doorway. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, and for the first time, his smile was gone. "Without the harmonizer, we're nothing. We'll return to chaos, to pain, to loneliness. You'll return to being human. Human is overrated. Human is flawed. We've evolved beyond that. You've been enslaved by a machine built by a madman. Dr. Hartwell saved us. In 1952, this town was dying, economically failing, people leaving, families breaking apart. He gave us unity. He gave us purpose. He turned you into puppets." I swung the axe at the harmonizer. It connected with a shower of sparks, and the machine let out a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The lights flickered, and I heard the crowd outside cry out in confusion. "No!" Gary lunged at me, but his movements were jerky now, uncoordinated. "You don't know what you're releasing!" I swung again and again. The harmonizer cracked, split, began to smoke. With each blow, I heard more voices, not the synchronized speech of the crowd, but individual voices, confused, frightened, angry. "What's happening? Where am I? How long have we... My children, where are my children?" The machine finally shattered completely, and the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard Gary sobbing. 70 years, he whispered. 70 years of peace, and you've destroyed it all. Emergency lighting kicked in, dim but enough to see.
Gary was on his knees, looking at his hands like he'd never seen them before. He looked older now, his face lined with age that the permanent smile had hidden. "I was 23 when Dr. Hartwell turned on the machine," he said. "Fresh out of college, newly elected mayor, the youngest mayor in Indiana history. I was going to save this town. Instead, I let him turn us into this. You're free now," I said. "Free?" He laughed bitterly. "Look outside." Through the open door, I could see chaos, people wandering aimlessly, crying, shouting, fighting. 70 years of suppressed emotions all released at once. Families discovering their children had never aged, had never grown up. People realizing they'd lost decades of their lives to a collective dream. "The fog," Gary said. "It wasn't keeping you in. It was keeping us in. The harmonizer created it, maintained it. Without it..." The fog was dissipating. For the first time, I could see beyond the town limits. But what I saw made no sense. Harmonville sat in a perfect circle of 1950s architecture. But beyond that circle was nothing but empty field. No roads leading in or out. No connection to the outside world at all. "We're not in Indiana anymore, are we?" I asked. "We're nowhere," Gary said. "Everywhere. Between. Dr. Hartwell didn't just build a machine to control minds. He built one that removed us from normal space. We exist in a bubble, a pocket dimension accessible only when conditions are right, when the fog appears on certain roads, when someone is lost enough to find us. Then how do I get home? I don't know. The harmonizer brought you here. Without it..." He stood up, suddenly looking every one of his 90-plus years. "You may have freed us from the harmony, but you've trapped us all in chaos, and yourself with us." Outside, the town was tearing itself apart. People who'd been neighbors for 70 years suddenly didn't recognize each other. The duplicate Dianes were merging and splitting randomly, screaming as their shared identity fractured. Buildings that had been maintained by collective will were aging rapidly, paint peeling, wood rotting, brick crumbling. "There has to be a way out," I said. "The Founder's house," Gary said weakly. "Dr. Hartwell's original laboratory. If there are answers, they'll be there. Oak Street, number 7. But hurry. Without the harmonizer maintaining the pocket dimension, I don't know how long this place will hold together." I ran through the chaotic streets. People grabbed at me, begging for help, for answers, for someone to tell them what to do. But I couldn't help them. I could barely help myself. The house at 7 Oak Street looked older than the rest of town, Victorian rather than 1950s suburban. The door was locked, but I kicked it in. Inside was a study filled with papers, journals, and equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. I found Dr. Hartwell's journal and started reading, skipping through pages of equations and theories until I found what I needed. The transportation frequency must be maintained at exactly 432 Hz to sustain the pocket dimension. Any variation will cause spatial displacement. To return subjects to original reality, reverse the polarity while broadcasting at 528 Hz. Warning: this will collapse the pocket entirely. Any consciousness not properly anchored will be lost. I didn't understand most of it, but I found what looked like a smaller version of the harmonizer in the basement. This one was more complex, with additional dials and switches. A note taped to it read, "Emergency return protocol. Use only in case of complete harmonic failure." As I powered it up, Gary appeared in the doorway, followed by several other townspeople. "You found it," he said. "The way home. It says it will collapse the pocket dimension. What happens to all of you? We were never meant to exist this long anyway. We should have aged, died, been replaced by new generations. Instead, we've been stuck in an eternal loop. Maybe it's time for it to end. There has to be another way. There isn't." Diane appeared, just one of her now, looking confused and frightened, but more human than I'd ever seen her. We felt it when the harmonizer broke. We're not real anymore. We're echoes, sustained by a machine that no longer exists. Use the device. Go home. Let us finally rest. The building shook. Through the window, I could see the edge of town dissolving, turning to static like a TV losing signal. It's collapsing anyway, Gary said. At least this way you get out. Someone should. Someone should remember Harmonville, even if it's just as a cautionary tale. I set the device to 528 Hz and reversed the polarity as the journal instructed. The machine hummed to life, sending out a pulse that made my teeth ache. Thank you, Gary said, and for the first time his smile seemed genuine. For freeing us, for ending the harmony. It wasn't living what we were doing, it was just existing. The pulse grew stronger. The walls became transparent, and I could see my truck somehow superimposed over the house like a double exposure. The townspeople were fading, becoming translucent. "Remember us," Diane called out as she disappeared. "Remember that we were real once?" The last thing I saw was Gary, age reversing rapidly until he was that 23-year-old mayor again, full of hope and plans to save his town. He nodded once, then was gone. Reality snapped back like a rubber band. I was sitting in my truck on the shoulder of US 41, engine running, dashboard clock showing 11:03 p.m., only 3 minutes after I'd turned onto that impossible road. The fog was gone. My GPS showed my location clearly, and I had full cell signal. I drove the rest of the way to Evansville in a daze, delivered my load, and filed a report about GPS malfunction causing a minor delay. No one questioned it. Why would they? But I kept Dr. Hartwell's journal. It had somehow made the transition with me, the only proof that Harmonville ever existed. In it I found his final entry, dated the day he activated the harmonizer. Today I save this town from itself. No more conflict, no more suffering, no more individual pain. They will resist at first, but soon they will understand. In harmony, there is peace. In unity, there is purpose. And in eternity, there is no more loss. Harmonville will be perfect forever. He was wrong, of course. Perfection that's forced isn't perfection at all. It's a prison with prettier bars. I thought that was the end of it. Delivered my load, filed my report, went home to my apartment in Fort Wayne and tried to forget about Harmonville. But you can't forget something like that. It follows you, haunts your dreams, makes you question everything you thought you knew about reality. I kept Dr. Hartwell's journal hidden in my truck, wrapped in plastic and tucked behind the spare tire. Sometimes I'd pull it out at rest stops and read passages, trying to understand the science behind what he'd done. Most of it was beyond me. Talk of dimensional frequencies and consciousness resonance and harmonic convergence points. But some parts were disturbingly clear. He'd mapped what he called thin places all across the Midwest, spots where reality was malleable, where the right frequency could punch a hole between dimensions. There were dozens marked on his hand-drawn maps. Rest areas, abandoned towns, stretches of highway where people regularly reported strange experiences. Harmonville had been his first success, but apparently he'd had bigger plans. 3 weeks after my escape from Harmonville, I was hauling a load of agricultural equipment from Indianapolis to Cedar Rapids. It was a routine run on I-380, one I'd done many times. But as I passed through a rural stretch of highway near Waterloo, my radio started acting up. Static at first, then voices. Not DJ chatter or commercials, but conversations. People talking about their day, about the weather, about their families. Normal stuff, except it was all happening simultaneously. Dozens of voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. And underneath it all, a rhythm, a pulse. Familiar.
I checked my GPS. It was glitching again, showing roads that didn't exist, towns that shouldn't be there. One name kept appearing and disappearing on the screen. New Harmonville. My hands tightened on the wheel. It wasn't possible. I'd destroyed the harmonizer. I'd watched Harmonville collapse, but the voices on the radio were getting clearer, and I recognized one of them. Randy? Randy Bowman? If you can hear this, please respond. This is Gary Henderson. I grabbed the CB handset. Gary? That's impossible. You disappeared. The whole town collapsed. Not disappeared, Randy. Displaced. When you destroyed the harmonizer, you didn't kill us. You scattered us. Our consciousness spread across all the thin places Dr. Hartwell had mapped. We exist in fragments now, pieces of ourselves in dozens of locations. That's not... How is that possible? The harmonizer didn't just control us, Randy. It transformed us. We became part of the frequency itself, living waves of consciousness. Without the machine to contain us, we dispersed. But we're still aware, still suffering, torn between dimensions, unable to fully exist in any of them. The static grew louder, and more voices joined in. All the people of Harmonville, talking over each other, their words blending into an incomprehensible cacophony. Please, Gary's voice cut through again. We need your help. There's a way to give us peace, to let us finally rest. But we need someone corporeal, someone still anchored in base reality. Why should I help you? You tried to trap me, to turn me into one of you. Because you're partially responsible for our current state. And because if we remain scattered like this, our presence will continue to destabilize the thin places. More people will be drawn in, lost between dimensions. The fog will spread. As if responding to his words, wisps of fog began forming along the highway despite the clear afternoon weather. Other truckers were slowing down, confused by the sudden change. I could see some of them reaching for their radios, probably hearing the same voices I was. What do you need me to do? I asked. Dr. Hartwell had a contingency plan, a way to properly disperse consciousness without leaving fragments. It's in his laboratory, but not the one you found. His real laboratory, the one that exists between dimensions. You'd need to enter one of the thin places voluntarily, find the laboratory, and activate the final harmony protocol. Enter voluntarily? After what happened last time? You'd be protected this time. You know what you're dealing with now. And you have the journal. Page 73 describes how to maintain dimensional anchor while traversing thin places. It requires a specific mental frequency, a way of thinking that keeps you tethered to your reality. I pulled over at the next rest stop and found page 73. The instructions were complex, but seemed to boil down to maintaining a constant internal narrative, a running monologue of who you are, where you're from, and where you're going. The moment you stop asserting your reality, you become susceptible to dimensional drift. Even if I wanted to help, I said into the CB, how would I find this laboratory? We can guide you. Our consciousness extends through all the thin places now. We can feel the laboratory's presence. It exists in a dimensional pocket similar to Harmonville, but more stable. Dr. Hartwell built it as his control center, the hub from which he planned to expand his harmony across the entire Midwest. Expand? He wanted to do this to more towns? He wanted to do it to all towns, to create a network of harmonized communities, all linked, all thinking as one. He believed it was the next step in human evolution. The laboratory contains the master controls for his entire planned network. The fog was getting thicker. I could see other drivers getting out of their vehicles, looking confused and frightened. If I didn't do something, they might get pulled into whatever remained of Harmonville's influence. Where's the nearest entry point? I asked. Mile marker 247 on I-380. There's an abandoned rest area there, closed since 1987. The fog will be thickest at 11:47 p.m. That's when the dimensional frequency aligns. But Randy, once you enter, You'll have exactly 1 hour before the alignment shifts. If you're not out by then, I'll be stuck between dimensions like you. Worse, without the protection of harmonization, your consciousness would be torn apart. You'd cease to exist entirely. I looked at my watch. It was 3 p.m. Mile marker 247 was about 4 hours away. That gave me time to prepare, to memorize the relevant pages of Dr. Hartwell's journal, to steel myself for what I was about to do. "I'll be there," I said. "Thank you, Randy. And please, hurry. Every moment we exist like this is agony. We're everywhere and nowhere, everyone and no one. We just want it to end." The voices faded, leaving only static. I got back in my truck and started driving, trying to ignore the way the fog seemed to follow me, always staying just at the edge of my vision. I reached the abandoned rest area just after 11 p.m. It was exactly as Gary had described. A crumbling parking lot overgrown with weeds, restroom buildings with boarded-up windows, rusted picnic tables slowly being reclaimed by nature. The whole place had an aura of wrongness about it, like reality itself was thinner here. I parked my truck and prepared according to the journal's instructions. I wrote my name, birth date, and home address on a piece of paper and put it in my pocket, a physical anchor to my reality. I set my phone to record audio, creating a technological tether. And most importantly, I began the mental mantra. My name is Randy Bowman. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I drive trucks for Midwest Freight Lines. I'm here to help the people of Harmonville find peace. I will return to my reality when this is done. I repeated it over and over as the fog rolled in. At exactly 11:47, the abandoned rest area changed. The buildings restored themselves, the weeds disappeared, and lights that hadn't worked in decades flickered to life. But it wasn't quite right. The buildings shifted and morphed, existing in multiple states simultaneously, new and old, whole and broken, real and impossible. A path appeared, made of the same luminescent fog that had led me to Harmonville. But this time, I walked it voluntarily, still chanting my mantra. The path led to a building that couldn't exist. It was bigger on the outside than the space available, and its architecture hurt to look at directly. This was Dr. Hartwell's laboratory, existing in a fold of space-time that touched all the thin places simultaneously. Inside was chaos. Equipment from every era of scientific development crammed together, Tesla coils next to quantum computers, vacuum tubes connected to fiber optic cables. In the center was a massive version of the harmonizer, dozens of times larger than the one in Harmonville, its surface covered in screens showing different locations across the Midwest. "You made it." I spun around. Gary was there, but not quite. He flickered in and out of existence, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes multiple versions of himself occupying the same space. "We all felt you arrive," he said, his voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "The others are here too, spread throughout the laboratory. We can manifest more clearly here, closer to the source of our transformation." Diane appeared, or parts of her did, a face here, a hand there, constantly shifting and reforming. "The final harmony protocol is in the main control room, Dr. Hartwell's last safeguard against what we've become." They led me deeper into the laboratory, through rooms that defied physics. One contained nothing but floating mathematical equations that rearranged themselves as I watched. Another held what looked like preserved moments in time, fragments of Harmonville's history suspended like insects in amber. The control room was dominated by a console that looked like a church organ crossed with a nuclear reactor control panel. Above it was a portrait of Dr. Hartwell, a thin, severe-looking man with eyes that seemed to follow me even though the painting itself was static. "The protocol is there," Gary said, pointing to a series of switches covered by a glass case. "But Randy, you need to understand what it does. It doesn't just disperse us. It erases us, completely. Every trace of our existence, every memory, every impact we've had on reality. It will be as if Harmonville never existed at all. But you're suffering. You said you wanted peace. We do, but total obliteration. It's terrifying, even after everything we've been through. I looked at the switches. 3 of them, labeled only with frequencies. 111 Hz, 222 Hz, 333 Hz. According to the journal, they needed to be activated in sequence, each one building on the last until they created what Hartwell called a consciousness dissolution wave. There might be another way, Diane said, her form solidifying slightly. We've had time to think, to explore this place. Dr. Hartwell has other machines here, other protocols. One of them might be able to reconstitute us, give us physical form again. Where? She pointed to another door. Through it, I could see a room filled with what looked like glass chambers, each one large enough to hold a person. The reharmonization chambers. He built them to create new citizens for his planned network. They can take consciousness and give it form. We could be real again, Randy. Human again. But would you be free? Or would you just be trading one form of harmony for another? They were quiet for a moment. Then Gary spoke, his voice sad but resigned. We don't know, but at least we'd exist. At least we'd have the chance to make that choice. I looked at my watch. 20 minutes had already passed. I had 40 minutes to make a decision that would affect dozens of consciousnesses. Show me how the chambers work, I said. The process was complex, but theoretically simple. Each chamber could take a dispersed consciousness and rebuild it a physical form based on its self-image. The people of Harmonville could potentially be restored, given new bodies, new lives. But there was a catch. The chambers required enormous amounts of energy, and there were only 12 of them. It would take multiple trips to restore everyone, and each trip through the thin places increased the risk of dimensional destabilization. There's something else, Gary said. We're not the only ones here. What do you mean? Dr. Hartwell, his consciousness is still present, spread through the machinery. He's been fighting us, trying to prevent us from using his equipment. He still believes in his vision of perfect harmony. As if summoned by his name, the laboratory shuddered. Screens flickered to life, all showing the same face. Dr. Hartwell, looking exactly as he did in the portrait. Interloper. His voice boomed from every speaker. You destroyed my masterpiece. You released chaos into perfection. And now you seek to compound your error. Your masterpiece was a prison, I said. It was paradise. No war, no conflict, no suffering. Only unity. Only peace. Only slavery. The image of Hartwell scowled. You understand nothing. Humanity is doomed to destroy itself through conflict and competition. I offered salvation. You offered oblivion. And what do you offer? You would restore these fragments to individual existence? Let them experience pain and loss and death again? That's cruelty, not kindness. The machinery around us began to hum, building to a dangerous pitch. Hartwell was activating something, trying to stop us. The chambers! Gary shouted. He's going to destroy them. I ran to the control console. According to the journal, there was an emergency override sequence, a fail-safe Hartwell had built in case his experiments went wrong. My fingers flew over the switches, inputting the code I'd memorized. 7, 3, 5, 2, 8, 1. The humming stopped. Hartwell's image flickered with rage. You dare use my own safeguards against me? You're not really him, I said, understanding hitting me suddenly. You're just an echo, like them. A consciousness preserved in the machinery. I am eternal. I am the future of humanity. You're a ghost haunting your own failed experiment. I turned to Gary and the others. We don't have much time. Pick 12 who want to try the chambers. The rest? I'm sorry, but you'll have to wait for another trip. If there is another trip, Diane said, each time someone enters the thin places, they grow thinner. Eventually they'll collapse entirely. Then we'd better make this count. They discussed among themselves, or within themselves. It was hard to tell where one consciousness ended and another began. Finally, 12 forms solidified enough to enter the chambers. Gary was among them, as was Diane. Some I recognized from my night in Harmonville. Others were strangers. The process takes 15 minutes, Gary said as he entered a chamber. You'll need to monitor the controls, make adjustments if anything goes wrong. I stood at the console, watching as the chambers filled with that luminescent fog. Inside, I could see the vague shapes of bodies forming, first skeletons of light, then layers of translucent flesh, slowly becoming solid. Hartwell's image appeared on every screen, his face contorted with fury. They won't be human. They'll be abominations, neither here nor there. You're creating monsters. They'll be free, I countered. Free to choose their own paths. Freedom is chaos. Order is peace. Your order was death. The chambers hummed and pulsed. I watched the energy readings, making small adjustments when they spiked or dipped. 10 minutes in, something went wrong. One of the chambers, containing a consciousness I didn't recognize, began to overload. The pattern's unstable, Hartwell laughed. You see, you can't fight nature. They were meant to be harmonized, not individualized. I ran to the failing chamber. Inside, the forming body was flickering, parts of it solid, parts still energy. The person inside was screaming, a sound that existed on multiple frequencies simultaneously. According to the journal, unstable patterns could be stabilized by introducing a harmonic counterfrequency. But I'd have to calculate it on the fly, and I had seconds before the chamber exploded. I thought back to everything I'd learned about Hartwell's theories. If consciousness existed as a wave, then an inverted wave should stabilize it. I input what I hoped was the right frequency, 864 Hz, double the original harmonization frequency, but inverted. The chamber stabilized. The screaming stopped. Inside, a young man, maybe 19 or 20, was taking his first breath in 70 years. 5 more minutes. The other chambers were holding steady. But I could feel something else happening. The laboratory itself was destabilizing. Cracks appeared in the walls, not physical cracks, but fractures in space-time itself, showing glimpses of other realities beyond. You're destroying everything, Hartwell raged. The dimensional barriers can't handle this much energy transfer. He was right. My watch showed I had only 15 minutes left before the alignment shifted and the laboratory was falling apart. If it collapsed while I was still inside. The chambers opened with a hiss. 12 people stumbled out. Real, physical people. Naked and confused, but undeniably human. Gary looked at his hands in wonder, touched his face, took a deep breath. We're real, he whispered. We're actually real again. We need to go, I said. Now. But Diane was looking at the remaining consciousnesses, dozens of them, still trapped in their dispersed state. We can't leave them. We can't save them all. Not now. Then activate the final harmony protocol. Give them peace. No! Hartwell's image grew larger, more distorted. I won't let you destroy my work. The laboratory shook violently. Equipment sparked and exploded. The dimensional cracks widened, and through them, I could see impossible things. Cities that never were. Highways that led to nowhere. Versions of reality where Hartwell had succeeded in harmonizing the entire world. Everyone out! I shouted. We ran through the collapsing laboratory, 12 newly physical people and me, dodging falling debris that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Behind us, Hartwell's consciousness raged, trying to pull us back, to trap us in his dying domain. The path back to the rest area was fragmenting. One moment it was solid fog, the next it was nothing but scattered light. We had to jump between stable sections, helping each other across gaps in reality. Randy! Gary grabbed my arm as I started to drift. Your mantra, keep saying it. I'd stopped. In the chaos, I'd forgotten to maintain my mental anchor. I could feel myself beginning to scatter, my consciousness spreading across dimensions. My name is Randy Bowman, I shouted. I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana. I drive trucks for Midwest Freight Lines. It helped, but barely. The path was almost gone. We could see the rest area ahead, but it was fading in and out of existence. My watch showed 2 minutes until the alignment shifted. Jump! I yelled. We leaped through the final gap just as the path dissolved entirely. We landed hard on cracked asphalt, the abandoned rest area solid and real around us. Behind us, the entrance to Hartwell's laboratory collapsed into itself, taking the remaining consciousnesses with it. No, Diane sobbed. We left them. We left them all behind. They're at peace now, Gary said quietly. When the laboratory collapsed, it would have taken everything connected to it. Hartwell, the dispersed consciousnesses, all of it. They're finally free. The 12 stood there, naked in the foggy night, trying to comprehend their new existence. They had no identification, no history for the past 70 years, no place in the modern world. But they were alive. What do we do now? One of them asked. I thought about it. 12 people appearing out of nowhere would raise questions. But truckers had networks, ways of helping people who needed to disappear or start over. There's a truck stop about 10 miles from here, I said. Owner's an old friend who doesn't ask questions. He'll help you get clothes, maybe even jobs. It won't be easy, but you can build new lives. New lives, Gary repeated. After 70 years, we get to start over. Is that a blessing or a curse? Diane asked. It's a choice, I said. And that's all anyone can ask for. I helped them into the back of my trailer. Illegal as hell, but sometimes the law and what's right don't align. The drive to the truck stop was silent except for the occasional sob or gasp of wonder from my passengers experiencing the real world for the first time in decades. My friend Duke ran the truck stop, a grizzled Vietnam vet who'd seen enough weird stuff in his life not to be fazed by much. When I explained I had 12 people who needed help, no questions asked, he just nodded. Runaways? He asked. Something like that. I got clothes in the donation bin. Can probably scrounge up some IDs from people who don't need them anymore. Jobs are harder, but I know people. Thanks, Duke. Don't thank me yet. This is going to cost you. How much? Not money. Information. What really happened out there? I looked at the 12, now dressed in mismatched clothes from the donation bin, trying to figure out how to use modern technology, struggling to exist in a world that had moved on without them. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. So I told him. Everything. Harmonville, the harmonizer, Dr. Hartwell, the dimensional laboratory. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. Always wondered about that rest area, he said when I finished. Truckers have been reporting weird stuff there for years. Guess now we know why. You believe me? Randy, I've been running this stop for 30 years. I've heard every story there is. And the one thing I've learned is that the impossible happens every damn day. We just usually don't notice. Over the next few hours, Duke worked his magic. The 12 got temporary IDs, cash-paying jobs at various businesses that didn't look too closely at backgrounds, and places to stay. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Gary shook my hand before leaving. Thank you, Randy, for everything, even for destroying the original harmonizer. We needed to be free, even if we didn't know it. What will you do now? Learn to be human again. It's been so long I've almost forgotten how, but I'm looking forward to remembering. Diane hugged me. You saved us, as many as you could.
I'm sorry about the others. They're at peace. That's more than they had before. One by one they left, dispersing into the world to build new lives. I wondered if they'd stay in touch, if they'd form their own community of people displaced in time, or if they'd prefer to forget, to pretend Harmonville never existed. I got back in my truck and continued my route to Cedar Rapids. The load was late, but dispatch didn't complain too much. Weather delays, I told them. They bought it. But I kept thinking about what Duke had said, that the impossible happens every day. How many other Harmonvilles were out there? How many other experiments in human consciousness had been conducted in the thin places of reality? I still have Dr. Hartwell's journal. Sometimes I study it, trying to understand his theories, his maps of dimensional weak points. Not because I want to use them, but because I want to be prepared. If there are other towns trapped between dimensions, other people caught in impossible situations, someone should know. Someone should be watching. The fog still appears sometimes on empty highways. GPS units still malfunction near certain rest areas, and truckers still report strange encounters in the middle of the night. But now I know these aren't just stories or hallucinations. They're glimpses of a larger truth, that reality is far stranger and more fragile than we realize. Harmonville is gone, its people either freed or erased, but the thin places remain, waiting for the next lost soul to stumble through. And sometimes, on foggy nights when I'm driving through rural Indiana, I swear I can still hear the voices on the radio, not the people of Harmonville, but others. Other experiments, other trapped souls, other places that shouldn't exist but do. I keep driving. It's what I do. But now I drive with purpose, watching for signs, listening for calls for help. Because if there's one thing I learned from Harmonville, it's that someone needs to be watching the spaces between. Someone needs to remember that not all prisons have bars, and not all freedoms are free. The road stretches on, endless and full of possibilities, and somewhere out there, in the fog between dimensions, the impossible waits to be discovered. 6 months passed. I tried to return to normal life, hauling loads across the Midwest, pretending that Harmonville had been just a strange dream. The 12 people I'd helped rescue had scattered to the winds, building their new lives. Gary sent me a postcard once. No return address, just a photo of a sunset and the words, "Learning to be human is harder and more beautiful than I remembered." I thought it was over. I was wrong. It started with the dreams. Every night, the same one. I was driving through fog, but instead of one impossible road, there were dozens, all leading to different versions of Harmonville. In some, the town was a paradise. In others, a nightmare. And in all of them, Dr. Hartwell stood at the center, still trying to complete his grand design. Then the reports started coming in. Truckers on my routes began talking about new incidents. Entire convoys going missing for hours, only to reappear with no memory of where they'd been. Rest areas where time moved differently. You'd stop for a 10-minute break and emerge to find hours had passed. GPS units not just malfunctioning, but showing entirely different highway systems, complete with exit numbers and town names that didn't exist. Duke called me one night in October. "Randy, you need to see this." I was passing through his truck stop anyway, so I pulled in. He led me to his office and pulled up security footage on his computer. "This was 3 nights ago," he said. The footage showed the parking lot at 3 a.m., empty except for a few trucks. Then, between one frame and the next, 12 people appeared. Not the 12 I'd rescued. Different people, wearing the same 1950s clothing, with the same confused expressions. "They stayed for about an hour," Duke said. "Didn't talk to anyone, just wandered around looking lost. Then they got into vehicles that weren't there before and drove off.
The vehicles just materialized. Did you try to talk to them? I went out there, but it was like they couldn't see me. Like they were in a different layer of reality, overlapping with ours, but not quite touching. I studied the footage. The people moved with that same synchronized gait I remembered from Harmonville, but something was different. They looked more real, more solid, more permanent. There's more, Duke said. He pulled up a map on his computer, marking locations across Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa. Every place I've marked, there's been a similar incident. People appearing from nowhere, all dressed like it's the 1950s, all moving in perfect harmony. How many locations? 47 so far. And Randy, they're all building something. Building what? Towns. Complete towns that appear overnight. The local authorities are going crazy trying to explain it. They're calling it mass hallucinations, elaborate hoaxes, anything but what it really is. I felt a chill run down my spine. Hartwell's network. He was planning to harmonize multiple towns, create a network of connected communities. But he's gone. You said the laboratory collapsed. His consciousness was in the machinery. When it collapsed, I trailed off, understanding hitting me like a truck. Oh God, he didn't die. He dispersed, just like the people of Harmonville. But he was stronger, more integrated with the dimensional frequency. He could have maintained cohesion. You're saying he's still out there? Not just out there. He's continuing his work, creating new Harmonvilles, populated with, I don't know what, copies? Dimensional echoes? People pulled from alternate realities? Duke leaned back in his chair. What do we do? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. It was from one of the locations Duke had marked. Randy Bowman? The voice was familiar but wrong, like someone doing an impression of someone I knew. Who is this? It's Gary, but not the Gary you knew. I'm from Harmonville 17. Dr. Hartwell created me, along with this entire town 3 days ago. We need your help. You're not real. You're just copies. We're as real as the originals. We have their memories, their personalities, their hopes and fears. The only difference is we know what we are, and we don't want to be harmonized. Then resist. Fight back. We can't. We're hardwired for harmony. It's in our very existence. But you broke the original harmonizer. You freed the first Harmonville. Dr. Hartwell fears you. That's why we could contact you. He's weaker when he thinks about you, less able to maintain control. Where are you? Interstate 74, exit 197. But Randy, you have to hurry. Tomorrow night, Hartwell plans to activate the Master Harmonic Protocol. He's going to link all 47 towns into a single network. Once that happens, he'll have enough power to expand exponentially. Within a year, he could harmonize the entire Midwest. I looked at Duke. He'd heard everything. I've got extra fuel barrels, he said, and some other supplies you might need. Whatever's happening, you can't face it alone. I don't have a choice. I'm the only one who's been inside the dimensional space and survived. I know how Hartwell thinks, how his technology works. Then at least take backup. Duke went to his safe and pulled out something I didn't expect, a device that looked like a modified CB radio crossed with some kind of scientific instrument. Been working on this since you told me your story. It's a dimensional frequency scanner. Should help you detect thin places, maybe even communicate across dimensional barriers. Duke, how? I wasn't always a truck stop owner, Randy. Did some work for the government back in the day. Secret stuff. The kind of thing that officially doesn't exist. When you told me about Harmonville, it confirmed some theories I'd had for years. I took the device. It was heavier than it looked, solid and real in a way that was reassuring. There's something else, Duke said. He handed me a folder full of photographs. These came in the mail yesterday. No return address. The photos showed me dozens of versions of me, all slightly different. Some older, some younger, some with scars I didn't have, some missing scars I did have. And in every photo I was standing in a different version of Harmonville. "He's been pulling versions of you from other dimensions," Duke said. "Testing them, seeing which one would be most likely to stop him. You're not the first Randy Bowman to face him, but according to the note that came with these, you're the last one left." The note was in Hartwell's handwriting. "Every dimension has its guardian. I've defeated 46 versions of you. You're the only one remaining. Come to New Harmonville Prime, or I'll harmonize your entire reality. You have 24 hours. I looked at the clock. 9 p.m. If I left now, I could make it to exit 197 by midnight, scout the situation, and figure out a plan before tomorrow night's deadline. "I'm coming with you," Duke said. "No. If something happens to me, someone needs to know the truth. Someone needs to warn people." "Then take this." He handed me a satellite phone. "Military grade. Should work even in dimensional distortions. If you need help, or if you need someone to carry on the fight, call." I loaded up on supplies, extra water, emergency flares, road salt, which, according to Hartwell's journal, could disrupt dimensional frequencies, and Duke's scanner. Then I hit the road, driving toward what might be my last night on Earth. Exit 197 appeared on my GPS at exactly midnight, even though I knew for a fact it didn't exist in normal reality. The off-ramp materialized as I approached, along with a sign. "Welcome to New Harmonville Prime. Population infinite." The moment I took the exit, reality shifted. The dark highway became a well-lit main street, but not like the original Harmonville. This was huge, a city rather than a town, stretching as far as I could see. Buildings from every era of American architecture stood side by side. Victorian mansions next to 1950s diners next to modern glass skyscrapers, and all of them were full of people. I parked my truck and got out. The streets were busy despite the late hour, thousands of people walking in perfect synchronization. But when I looked closer, I realized they weren't all the same. There were variations, different clothes, different faces, different ages. It was like Hartwell had populated his city with every possible version of every person who'd ever lived in a small Midwest town. Impressive, isn't it? I turned. Dr. Hartwell stood behind me, but like everything else here, he was more than he'd been. Taller, more solid, more real. His eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. 47 towns worth of consciousness, all flowing through me, he said. I am no longer Eugene Hartwell. I am harmony itself. You're a parasite, feeding on stolen lives. I'm evolution, the next step in human consciousness. Individual thought is chaos, Randy. Look at your world. War, hatred, suffering, all because people insist on thinking for themselves. Thinking for ourselves is what makes us human. And look where it's gotten you. Your reality is dying, Randy. Climate change, nuclear weapons, social collapse. Within 50 years, your version of humanity will destroy itself. But my version will last forever. He gestured to the city around us. Every person here is happy. They have no conflict, no pain, no fear. They exist in perfect harmony. They don't exist at all. They're just echoes of your will. Are they? He snapped his fingers, and suddenly the synchronized movement stopped. Every person in sight turned to look at me, and they all spoke in their own voices. We choose this. We want harmony. We're happy here. Join us, Randy. It's better this way. The chorus of voices was overwhelming, each one sincere, each one seemingly individual. But underneath, I could hear it, the pulse, the rhythm of the harmonizer. Nice trick, I said. But I've heard that song before. Hartwell's smile faltered slightly. You're more resistant than the other versions of you. They all broke eventually, accepted the harmony. What makes you different? Maybe I'm just more stubborn. Or maybe, a familiar voice said, he has help. Gary, my Gary, the one I'd rescued, stepped out of an alley. But he wasn't alone. All 12 of them were there, the people I'd saved from the original Harmonville. How? We've been following you, Diane explained. Ever since the dream started. We still have a connection to the harmonic frequency, even if we're free from it. We could feel Hartwell rebuilding, expanding. We can't let him do to others what he did to us, Gary said. We've been preparing. Preparing how? Hartwell laughed. You're just 12 humans against my infinite city. Not just 12, Gary said. He pulled out a device similar to Duke's scanner. We've been in contact with the other versions, the ones you created but who don't want to be harmonized. Your control isn't as perfect as you think. Hartwell's expression darkened. Impossible. They're all part of me. No, Diane said. They're part of the harmony. But harmony doesn't mean slavery. It can mean cooperation, choice, free will within unity. All around us, the synchronized movement was breaking down. People were stopping, looking confused, some continuing their routined paths while others stood still. The perfect order was fracturing. You see, Gary explained, we've been teaching them. Broadcasting on the harmonic frequency, but a different message. Not obey, but choose. Not surrender, but cooperate. Hartwell raised his hands, and energy crackled between his fingers. Then I'll simply reset them, wipe their consciousness clean and start over. You could, I said, pulling out Duke's scanner. I'd modified it during the drive, based on notes in Hartwell's journal. But that would require focusing all your energy in one burst, and while you're doing that, you'd be vulnerable. To what? To this. I activated the scanner, but instead of scanning, it broadcast. A single pure tone at 528 Hertz, the same frequency I'd used to escape the original Harmonville. The frequency of dissolution. Hartwell screamed, his form flickering. All around us, the city began to shift and change. Buildings aged decades in seconds, then renewed themselves, then aged again. The people split into multiple versions of themselves, each one slightly different. You're destroying everything, Hartwell roared. No, Gary said. We're setting it free. The 12 formed a circle around Hartwell and me, joining hands. They began to speak, not in unison, but in harmony. Different words, different tones, but all working together. We were Harmonville. We were enslaved. We were freed. We chose our path. Now they choose theirs. The city was transforming. Instead of one massive Harmonville, it was becoming 47 distinct towns, each with its own character, its own identity. The people were becoming real individuals, not copies or echoes, but actual beings with free will. Hartwell fell to his knees, his form becoming less solid. My work, my perfect harmony. Harmony isn't perfection, I said. It's balance. It's different notes working together to create something beautiful. But they have to be different notes, or it's just noise. You don't understand, he whispered. Without the harmony, they'll suffer. They'll die. They'll live, Diane corrected. Really live, not just exist. Hartwell looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw not the mad scientist, but the man he'd once been. Someone who'd wanted to help, to save his dying town, to prevent suffering. I just wanted to fix things, he said, to make everything perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good, I replied. And good is messy, complicated, painful sometimes, but it's also real. The scanner in my hand was growing hot.
The frequency was building, reaching a critical point. Around us, reality was fracturing, showing glimpses of all the dimensions Hartwell had accessed, all the possibilities he'd tried to control. "Choose," Gary said to Hartwell. "You still have consciousness. You can still choose. Dissolve into nothing, or become something new, something real." Hartwell looked at the 12, then at me, then at the transforming city around us. I don't know how to be anything but harmony." "Then learn," I said. "Like they did. Like we all do, every day." The scanner reached its limit and shattered in my hand. The frequency burst, spread out like a shock wave, washing over everything. Hartwell screamed, then went silent, his form dispersing into countless points of light. But instead of disappearing, the light settled into the 47 towns, a small piece in each one. Not controlling, just existing. Part of them, but not defining them. The city was gone. In its place were 47 separate small towns, each sitting in its own dimensional pocket, but no longer isolated. Roads connected them, real roads that existed in normal space. The people were confused but free, looking around with wonder at their individuality. "We did it," Gary said, but he looked exhausted. "We actually did it." "What happens to them now?" I asked, gesturing at the thousands of newly free people. "They integrate," Diane said. "Slowly, carefully. Some will choose to stay in their towns, building new communities. Others will leave, explore the world. It'll be chaos for a while, but it'll be their chaos." One of the newly freed people approached us, a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of 1952, but with eyes that held a modern awareness. "Are we real?" she asked. "As real as anyone," Gary told her. "You have consciousness, free will, the ability to choose. That's all anyone has." "But we're not from here. We're from between." "So were we," Diane said. "For 70 years, we existed in harmony. Now we exist in reality. It's harder, but better." The woman nodded and walked back to the others, who were all having similar revelations. Some were crying, some laughing, some just standing in shock. But they were all feeling, all thinking, all being. "Randy," Gary said, "there's something else. The dimensional barriers, they're not going to close. These thin places will always exist now. Other things might come through. Other Hartwells? Or worse. Or better. We don't know. But someone needs to watch. Someone needs to be ready." I thought about my life on the road, constantly moving, never settling. Maybe this was why. Maybe I was meant to be a guardian of the thin places, watching for threats and opportunities alike. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll keep driving, keep watching." "Not alone." Duke's voice crackled through the satellite phone I'd forgotten I was carrying. "I've been monitoring everything. Got a whole network of truckers ready to help. We'll be the watchers on the highways, the guardians of the thin places." "The Knights of the Open Road," Gary said with a small smile. "I like it." The 12 began to disperse, each heading to one of the towns to help with the integration. Gary shook my hand one last time. "Thank you, Randy, for everything. You saved us twice, once from harmony, once from chaos. You saved yourselves. I just gave you the chance." He smiled, a real human smile, nothing like the painful rictus of the original Harmonville. Then he walked away, heading toward his new purpose. I got back in my truck and started driving. The 47 towns would appear on maps now, small additions to the Midwest landscape. People would wonder where they came from, but official explanations would be found. Bureaucratic errors, overlooked census data, collective amnesia. The world would adapt, as it always did, to the impossible. My CB crackled to life. Breaker, breaker. This is Kentucky Joe. Just saw something weird at mile marker 89. Fog rolling in where there shouldn't be none. I picked up the handset. This is Ohio Dale. I'm on my way. Keep your distance, but keep watching. Roger that. What are we looking for? Anything that doesn't belong. And Joe, if you see a road that wasn't there before, don't take it. Wait for backup. Copy that. Kentucky Joe out.
I drove toward mile marker 89, Duke's scanner rebuilt and sitting on my dashboard, Hartwell's journal beside me. The thin places were multiplying, reality becoming more flexible. We were entering a new age, one where the impossible was just another part of life. But we'd be ready. The truckers, the watchers, the guardians of the highway. We'd keep the roads safe, help the lost, and prevent anyone else from imposing their version of perfection on an imperfect world. The highway stretched out ahead, endless and full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, another thin place was forming. Another challenge, another opportunity, another chance to choose between harmony and freedom. I chose freedom every time. The fog was waiting at mile marker 89, glowing with that familiar luminescence. Through it, I could see the outline of something. Not a town this time, but something else. Something new. I pulled over and waited for backup. Within an hour, 3 other trucks had arrived. Duke was in one of them, having closed his truck stop to join the watch. "What do you think it is?" he asked. "Only one way to find out." We walked toward the fog together, 4 truckers facing the unknown. The fog parted as we approached, revealing not a road or a town, but a bridge. A massive bridge that arched up into the fog, disappearing into dimensions we couldn't see. A figure stood at the entrance to the bridge. Not Hartwell. Not anyone from Harmonville. Something entirely different. It looked human, but moved like water, constantly flowing and reforming. "Greetings," it said in a voice like wind chimes. "We are refugees from a reality that no longer exists. We seek passage through your dimension to reach safe harbor. Will you grant us crossing?" I looked at the others. Duke shrugged. "You're the expert on this stuff, Randy." I stepped forward. "How many of you are there?" "Thousands. We are the last of our kind." "Are you dangerous?" "Only if threatened. We seek only passage, not settlement." "And if we refuse?" "Then we remain here, at the threshold, until your reality can no longer support our presence. Eventually, the bridge will collapse, possibly damaging both our dimensions. Another choice. Another moment where the future balanced on a decision." "You can cross," I said. "But we'll be watching. Any sign of trouble, any harm to our people, and we'll find a way to stop you." "Understood. We are grateful." The figure flowed back onto the bridge, and behind it, thousands of similar beings began to cross. They moved quickly but carefully, acknowledging us as they passed. It took 3 hours for them all to cross, and then the bridge faded, leaving only the normal highway. "Think we did the right thing?" Duke asked. "Ask me in 50 years, I said. "If we're still around, it was probably the right call." We got back in our trucks and returned to our routes. But now we had a purpose beyond hauling freight. We were the thin line between dimensions, the watchers at the threshold, the ones who decided what could cross and what couldn't. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but then again, nothing about my life had gone according to plan since that first night at the rest area on I-80. The world was bigger, stranger, and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. But it was also more wonderful. As I drove through the night, I thought about Harmonville, both the original and the 47 new ones. They were out there now, finding their own paths, making their own choices, free to succeed or fail, to thrive or struggle, to be human in all its messy glory. And I'd keep driving, keep watching, keep choosing freedom over harmony, chaos over control, reality over perfection. Because that's what truckers do. We keep moving, keep delivering, keep the world connected. Even when that world includes dimensions we don't understand and beings we can't imagine. The road goes on forever and the party never ends. But now, at least, we're watching the door.